the head of the Dan dynasty's Ministry of Law Enforcement, was without a doubt very powerful. However, there were now more than a dozen powerful opponents against him. Up until this point, not even all of the enemies had engaged in battle. At this moment, he was wondering where Chen Jun was, as well as everyone else. To the enemy, it seemed as if they had lost their minds over such a desperate situation. They were ridiculous to even think that the head hoped to save them. Did Fang Sheng not expect a large number of experts to oppose him? His actions were noble and selfless. Fang Sheng was considered the protector of all people. But right now, he wasn't interested in anything besides Chen Jun's life. His friend who is a prince also thought Fang Zheng was too kind and noble. But weren't the enemies afraid of Fang Zheng? Weren't the masks that hid their ugly faces proof of that? Fang Chen decided that he would fight to his last breath until he was sure he had exterminated every single one of them. On that day, the strongest man of the Dan dynasty died in battle. So let's take a look at the Yang Mountain Range, where the Yang Ho dynasty and its Nanshan school were located. It seemed to be the most ordinary school day. The boy was trying to call out to Anzheng, who was most likely asleep. But realizing that his friend was not responding or answering his question, the young man looked closer. And when he gently touched it, he noticed the blood that stained his clothes and the place where he studied. This sent my friend into a frenzied shock. He knew who the culprit was and who had done this to Anzheng. It was Gao Di. This was probably not the first time he had a grudge against Anzheng. Only this situation was even boring to him. It was obvious that he despised both him and Anzheng, so he was mocking him. The Shosho saw his henchman beating Anzheng just before class, but now he was at death's door. As it turned out, this trio was only playing around with him. They thought that Anzhen was most likely pretending, but when they shoved him down to the floor from the desk, Anzheng still hadn't woken up. The Shosho had no more patience. It looked like he was about to snap. He didn't want to give his friend any offense to anyone and slapped the freak in the face, so much so that he bounced back. Blood dripped from his nose. A real fight was now breaking out. He ordered his pawns to capture Shosho, and they obeyed his instructions without question. Gao Di killed Shushu's friend. If he let him live today, he would definitely rip off his miserable life in the future and avenge Anzheng. At that time, Gao Di was left with no other option but to do what Shosho asked. There weren't many residents in this wilderness, so Gao Di was counting on the fact that he wouldn't get hurt for this. Not to mention killing Shushu, who had neither father nor mother. How long has it been since he and Anzheng got together? Since he valued his friend so much, Gao Di was willing to arrange for them to meet. This spoiled teenager was about to slit the orphan's throat. The Shosho didn't even resist anymore, but just waited for this fate, with the unconcealed fear of the unknown in his eyes. But someone intercepted the knife blade right into her hand, not sparing her a cut. It was Anzhen. Everyone thought it was impossible because he was kind of dead. Could it be his ghost? But the heavens had influenced the essence of things of this world and reborn him. In fact, Fang Zhen's soul was transferred into the body of a breathless child. And this child is the weakest child in the world, how ironic. But Fang Zheng's spirit was much stronger. He was able to stand up to freaks like Gao Di and was not afraid of anyone. All the students who managed to avoid being caught by Anzheng's hot hand ran away from the school, seeking rescue and help for those who remained there. One apprentice was lucky enough to stumble right into the sixth master. He was formidable and intimidating, but in such a situation, he was like a lifeline for the frightened disciple. The sixth master was feared and respected by many, for he did not befit such licentious behavior, such as now. And now there must be a lesson. The disciple couldn't utter a single word. All he managed to say was, Anzheng's name. Realizing the situation, the sixth master dismissed the disciple as some kind of trash, and ran to the classroom. How dare those little kids do something like that in his class? All those who had so wished for Anzhenyu's death and mocked him as best they could were now literally trembling in fear, in pain, and in the possible fate they themselves wished for Zhenyu. When these scum beat up Anzheng, they always aimed precisely at the vital spots on his body. As for this boy, he had hit Anzheng 16 times with his fist. His body remembered this because it was literally whimpering in pain right now. But Gao Di, he was the one who was the instigator of all this bullying and ordered his 6 men to beat Anzheng to death. Anzheng remembered everything, every blow, all the pain, all his nothingness from not being able to fight back. But now he was ready to pay his debt, because he was no longer the boy who was afraid of even his own shadow. His enemies were no longer able to fight back or cooperate to pile Anzhenyu together. All the advantage was in his hands, but he wasn't as violent as them, and didn't want to cause a massacre here, so he only used his fists. This guy chose the wrong side, and was now paying for his own mistakes with the same things he had been sowing all these past years. He was small, but he was so cruel to Anzhenyu. The sixth master stopped the massacre with his presence. The master looked at the defeated boy who was writhing in pain. Suddenly, he realized that Anzhen had managed to stab 23 times in a blink of an eye. But each time, he avoided the vital places. Sixth master wasn't going to scold him for what had just happened. He was much more interested in how Anzhen managed to pull this all off. Anzhen didn't feel scared, but instead focused on the memories of the dead soul whose place he had taken. In front of him was not just a master, but the sixth of the 9 strongest bandits. This school was located in the mortal world in Yan country, near the Qianman mountain. The people here were divided by power and influence, but the territory was ruled by the 9 strongest bandits. There were no laws here, and power simply does not exist, which was the perfect haven for bandits. The teachers at the school were the same thugs whose aim was to educate their successors. No wonder this bunch of scum beat up everyone they could with impunity. In thoughtfulness, Anzhen seemed to ignore the master's question, who didn't really like it. In fact, Anzhen was simply following the sixth master's admonition that said, "Those who cannot fight back will never be able to survive in this world." After school, Anzhen always practiced for 2 hours, no less, and it was all about standing up for himself. Only the master remembered that previously, this boy had not even tried to resist. So what had changed? As soon as he saw that the master was communicating with Anzhen, he tried to quickly explain the whole situation and make it clear that it wasn't his friend's fault. In order to survive, Anzhen had endured all the taunts and beatings until today. But now, he didn't care who hurt him, because now he was able to fight back. He would pay all his abusers in the same coin, and whoever was kind to him would receive double the kindness from him. The master liked Anzhen's attitude a lot. It was amazing how this boy had changed in such a short time. The sixth master saw that Anzhen had injured himself seriously. So he presented him with a pouch and sent the young man to the infirmary. And once he regained his strength, he should find the sixth master in the Great Hall. Without hesitation, Anzhen accepted the gift from the master and thanked him for his kindness. But just then, Gaudi woke up and called out to Anzhen. He no longer had anything to defend himself with, so he threw simple words of threat towards Zhenya and threatened the local authorities. Just think about it. Anzhen didn't listen anymore, and in half a turn he drew his blade and pointed it straight at Gaudi. This knife could cut his ear or stab him in the head. Can't he just stand there? That's what happened. Gaudi lost his right ear, but he was still alive. This was reassuring to Anzhen. He was just not comfortable with quiet and peaceful days. It was time to walk away from this place, where not leaving a bloody mess was unfortunately not an option. After this situation, the friend immediately noticed that Anzhen had seriously changed and didn't look like himself, as he had greatly frightened those scoundrels. But the guy couldn't answer anything as he started coughing up blood. His body was too badly scarred inside, and now even breathing was difficult. Unable to resist any longer, he spun on his friend, who immediately backed him up. Adapt to a new body, and with such wounds, was quite a difficult process. But our hero will surely cope, if not by himself, then with the support of Shaw. In this world, his guiding star will be his goal. The emperor of the Dan dynasty saw that things were not the best in the Yanguo Empire at that time. Fang Zhen, being the head of the Ministry of Law Enforcement of the Dan dynasty, could consider the Yanguo Empire to be just a tiny speck of dust compared to the Dai dynasty. Just now, the emperor had received a report that Qi couldn't get out with Yanguo, since Fan Shen was his best friend and also the emperor's most trusted person. Of course, the emperor sent him to the Yanguo Empire with orders to rescue his son. Fang Zheng set off at the same moment without even taking a horse or additional weapons. He believed that he would definitely save the prince, but in the dark forest, he was surrounded by 5 terrifying shadows that wanted to take Fang Zhen's life. In the end, he realized that it was a trap set for his own extermination. But thankfully, everything was okay now. That was just a memory. And now he was on his best friend's back, injured but safe. And Zhen was quite slender, but Shosho didn't understand why he was so heavy. Usually, when people carry another person and find that person getting heavier, it's a bad sign. But in order not to scare Shosho with his omens, An immediately made it clear that his friend was just tired. It was surprising that even in such a state, Anzhen had the strength to joke around. When his great-grandmother became very ill, his mother carried her on her back to the physician. As the grandmother grew heavier and heavier, Anzheng's grandmother died before reaching the doctor. But Shusho in no way let Anzheng die and get him to the healer in time. This time, Anzhen made a promise to himself that he wouldn't die so easily this time. Finally, they reached the pavilion of Healer Q. The girl with long hair, sunny yellow eyes, and wearing a green robe was named Liu Er. The Shosho hurried her to bring Mr. Healer. Seeing a familiar face, she rushed over to the guy to see what had happened to Anne's brother. And Jen was already completely unconscious. There was still hope that he would soon be treated and recover. Only there was one but. Liu thought that he was unlikely to be treated. But if no one helps him, it is likely that he will die. It was the doctor himself who came out to the noise the Shosho made. In the entire south street of the mountain, there would hardly be a single daredevil who would dare to break into his pavilion like that. Everyone also knew that Old Man Chu didn't treat people in 3 cases. The first was if he was seriously drunk, and the second was if it was nighttime outside. And the third one, the poor beggars are not allowed in. Seeing how the guys were dressed, Chu certainly assumed that they were homeless and wouldn't have the money to pay for treatment. There was no other way out but to beg on his knees for the healer to save Jen's life. But it was probably useless to ask for it, for that was how Chu himself expressed himself. After somehow waking up and taking out the pouch that the 6th master had given him, Jen gave it to the healer with trembling hands. At this, he immediately remonstrated. If they had said earlier that they had the money, then there would be no claims. Healer Q immediately escorted the boy to his office, where he tried to feel for a pulse in his hands. And he realized a terrifying thing. Almost all of Anjung's insides had literally turned to mush. In such a state, it was a miracle that Jen was alive and conscious at all. Right now, he wasn't going to say goodbye to his life and ask the healer to take the snake scales, the iron 9-eyed leaf, cinnabar powder, 3 different kinds of poisonous herb, then mix it all up and let him drink the resulting medicine. From such a request, the healer literally jumped up and rudely objected that if you mix these ingredients and drink it, any man would die. Therefore, he decided not to take money from Anjung because he valued his reputation a lot. Only the healer did not take into account one thing. Zheng's organs were in a terrible state, which meant that ordinary medicines were powerless here. Only poison could speed up their regeneration, as well as a barrel of water for washing. The healer could only guess how the boy had such knowledge, but he was not going to report back and asked to fulfill his request. If he died, it wouldn't be the doctor's fault. In that case, Physician Chu couldn't object. He was relieved of the responsibility for Anjung's life, which meant he would provide him with all the conditions for his comfortable death, he thought. Liu prepared the necessary decoction that the healer had made. With tears in her eyes, she gave it to him like a deadly poison. She was also terribly embarrassed at seeing the guy naked and hurriedly ran away. Shu had once heard that the leader of that gang was a friend of the big shots of Chen's South Street domain. Anjung might have overdone it a bit today, because it turns out he humiliated the Chen people. But, on the other hand, putting a face to such villains is like being one yourself. Has Shaw ever heard of the Ministry of Law and Order? Everyone knew about him. As soon as the local gangsters hear about him, they tuck their tails. Dan is the largest and one of the most powerful dynasties that covered an area of thousands of miles. This dynasty is several times larger than the Yongo Empire. Because of such a vast territory, there were many internecine wars in the Dan dynasty. To stabilize matters within the dynasty, to bring justice back to its lands, what was needed was an institution that could forcefully suppress the fires of rebellion. For this purpose, the Ministry of Law and Order was organized. However, the head of this ministry, Fang Zhen, in order to save the dynasty, caused great discontent among the nobility. As a result, he was trapped and killed, and his corpse was dumped near Changman Mountain. No one from the common people even knew yet that the head of the Ministry of Law Enforcement, the great famous Fang Zhen, as Shosho put it, had been assassinated.
Only when asked how Anjung knew about it, the young man said that he just made it up. A lucky person akin to him couldn't die so easily.
The Shosho was not on a joke scared from such news, because such a great hero cannot die. If it so happens that one day Shosho meets Fang Zheng, he will simply die of happiness. The Shosho will definitely meet him, because Anjung promised him so. The guys decide to leave the hospital, but then they encounter a vicious pit bull terrier who is about to eat the cat from his hunger. Showa suggested not to pay attention because it was a law of nature. Anjun knew that the weak would always be bullied. Animals had everything like humans. But in the end, Anjung couldn't bear to look at it and chased the dog away. All he had to do was just shout. He decided to take the kitten in to be his new companion. The cat was as white as snow and had amazingly brilliant blue eyes like 2 diamonds. Now the cat's name was Xiaoshan, which means kindness and vulnerability. The kitten quickly adapted to Anjeng. It felt completely safe on his shoulder. Anjung's body was already fine. Old Man Chu had done a good job even though he was stingy. He was a pretty good person at heart. The wounds were almost healed. If Anjung wanted to return to the Ministry of Law and Order, he should recover his strength. For starters, he wondered if there was anywhere he could buy a spirit stone, and preferably on South Street. As far as Shu knew, a spirit stone was needed by those who practiced martial arts. On South Street, one could only find spirit stone in the Ku institution and Chen's domain. The black market might have it too, but the price will be much higher. As for the Chen clan, they will be worse than Ku. In the South Street, almost all the shops are their property, and the subordinates and guards are more than 100. But in any case, the problem was another, that the material means they did not have. While the boys were walking, they were spotted by Gao Di, as well as seventh brother Chen. Of course, the boy hurriedly reported that An Zhen had beaten him up last time. These guys were pretty vindictive, and it was obvious that the brother wanted to avenge his brother, no matter who was at fault. Shosho was startled, but didn't give a backward glance. But An Zhen took a closer look to assess his opponent. And Zheng tried to make a joke, saying he wasn't his father and how could he know them. But the opponents didn't like the joke very much, because the guy didn't watch what he said at all. The seventh brother ordered An Zheng to cut off his tongue so that he would talk less. Chen's possessions must have been very rich. Or they just don't realize that if An Zheng takes action, it will cost them. The guys were confident in their abilities, and found an advantage in their numbers. So without listening to Zheng's words anymore, they proceeded to battle, thinking that by capturing the boy, they've already defeated him. But as if it won't be that simple. A broken jaw will cost 300 silver. Broken bones in the lungs about 500 silver. But a broken leg is already 1,000 silver. Well, their skills were pretty good. Didn't the master teach them? Well, I guess I didn't get the hang of it. And by the way, this one capture will cost 1,000 and 1,500 silver. The fight was in full swing. The noise in the street attracted other people who were looking out of the window. The little girl tried to see this boy fighting, but her mother asked her to go back to her room, and that was the end of the spectacle. The woman saw him as just an ordinary boy from the outside, but she didn't understand why this 10-year-old boy had such an age-inappropriate aura. In total, An Zhen counted the injuries he had done to him as 3,300 silver. But after all, this creep wouldn't stop behaving so vilely, so An Zhen couldn't leave him like this. So now this man will meet his death on the street. He seemed to be very lucky today. Some old man stopped An Zheng, asking him to spare this guy. The man's grip was very tight. It would not be easy to break out of it. But the man had no intention of holding An Zheng forcibly and immediately let him go, apologizing for these scum. He felt that An Zheng should not stoop to their level, but the young man didn't think of letting this creep go so easily. He couldn't pass by a man who was eager to do evil. If he did nothing now, he would continue to abuse the weak. The Lord still asked for mercy for these guys, and even said that he would make these scum pay more than the amount An Zheng indicated as a sign of respect to the Lord. But An Zheng didn't need this master's respect. That scumbag slept around and saw how to maim or rip someone off. The boy began to beg his father to save him. The man was darker than a cloud, but in the end, he still stood up for his son and pushed An Zheng away, stopping his fatal blow. The Lord decided to continue speaking. He repented to An Zhen, as he understood what his son had done was wrong. But he hoped for favor, and that the broken arm was enough of a lesson. Mr. Chen bowed once more and apologized, hoping that this conflict was over. There was no point in waiting, so they immediately rushed away, lest An Zheng change his mind. The Shosho, who had been standing behind the entire time, resented the fact that the enemies had escaped. In front of them was Chen Pu, the martial expert. Messing with him was not a good idea. A martial expert is a person who has received power from the sky, earth, sun, and moon. The people who lived on South Street are most unusual, however. A person who has gone through numerous spinal cord purifications and body hardening in general becomes someone who can withstand the infusion of powerful energy into his body. Such people are called combat experts. Martial experts are categorized by strength level: soul hardening, body hardening, energy concentration, minor majesties, major majesties, celestial realm. Mr. Chen must be at the second stage of development, so he had enough strength to overpower An Zhen and Shosho, but still, he refrained, which couldn't be that easy. When the guys got home, they saw a huge box of silver. The Shosho was amazed that Mr. Chen had really given them silver. Seeing his friend's admiration, An Zheng decided to give him all the silver if he wanted. The Shosho couldn't take all that silver because that money was really An Zheng's. For An Zhen, Shoshu was willing to sacrifice his life. So for An Zhen, this boy is the youngest brother, and friendship is more important than money. But somehow An Zheng felt that this silver would not bring them any luck. In fact, he was right, because no good should be expected from people like Chen. Whether his son did the right thing or not, his father didn't care much about it. First and foremost, the family's reputation. Not everyone can own the silver of the Chen family. Suddenly, Shosho realized that these people had just ambushed them. After all, they had delivered the silver to them so quickly, they probably already knew where their home was. Anjen ordered the Shosho to hide with his relatives in the school, since somehow there were possessions of the 9 strongest bandits. The Chen family's subordinates will not break in. Anjung dared to stay here alone. He realized that these bastards knew no boundaries, and there was a chance that they would raise their hand on Shosho's loved ones. The boy wanted to stay and help his brother, but he ordered him to leave through the backyard. He promised to return to Anjung as soon as he took care of his family. He believed they would go through mountains and rivers, but would overcome any obstacles together. Anjung also believed this. Well, in the meantime, he already had visitors. Only it wasn't the one Anjung expected to see. The silhouette of the 6th master loomed in the shadows, but he was not clearly visible. Therefore, Anjung opened the doors incredibly fast and was about to attack with his sword already. But the master quickly intercepted it with 2 fingers. The bandit guessed that the young man was expecting people from the Chen family. His caution was impressive, but the master would never think that Anjen would think of crossing the path of these people. The 6th master was worried about this. After all, the Ku family and the Chen family were still fighting over lands to this day. Anjung was a disciple of the Ku institution. If the 6th master helped him, the Chen family would attack the Ku family by making it look like an excuse. This young man's intelligence impressed the bandit. Everything was right. Ku establishment could not interfere. The 6th master admired Anjung. Then, Anjung decided to ask that the 6th master protect his friend, Shosho, and his family. After all, he had nothing to do with this matter. The 9 strongest bandits were far from the most powerful people in this world. But there was no way they would beg for mercy. If Shosho and his loved ones stayed in the school, no one else would dare to do anything about it. The master left and wished him good luck. But the boy still had one question that did not give him rest. This question he shouted to him literally in his wake. Why can laws only keep good people down? Why do the bad ones do whatever they want? Without turning around, the bandit answered the question. If good people do whatever they want, will they still be good? Anjung felt that they should then be judged by their original intention. Anjen looked fearless now, and calmly waited for the Chen family. Who was already here? He asked the same question he had asked his master. Only these bandits didn't care who was bad, who was good. They came for silver. There were no good people in this world, according to them. Laws were not invented to subdue the good guys, but the bad guys. If these guys joined evil, they will be punished accordingly. Anjung used his methods to eradicate evil. To do so, he will stain his hands with blood, incurring the wrath of heaven, but will pass all obstacles for justice. Originally, the master wanted to use Anjung to spark a war between the Ku and Chen families. But he miscalculated and didn't expect that the 6th bandit wouldn't stand up for the boy. A young master suddenly appeared. The subordinates immediately began to explain the reason why they were here. His explanation was as follows. Anjung had beaten up many of their men, blackmailed and cheated them out of 3,000 silver. This guy couldn't be let go like this. Chen took it upon himself that the young master was very fiery, and his gaze was very cold, like a devil in the flesh. Hearing these explanations, the young gentleman laughed as if it was a funny joke to him. He found Anjung violent and serious in his intentions. A perfect match for Mr. Chen's right hand, wasn't he? It had been a rough night, so the guys decided to go to the dining room and order themselves 2 bottles of wine. The woman set a table full of food for them. Seeing how small these guys are, she originally wanted to offer them water and sugar, but they insisted on their wine. Looking closer at Anjung, she realized that she had seen him recently. A young man who had recently beaten up several men. In the end, the woman decided to cheat and added water to the wine. It was quite frugal, as Anjung pointed out. Oh, one more word, and that woman is ready to rip his ear off and sell it for the price of a pig's ear. But if she wants the guy to shut up, then let her give them a discount. Before entering the restaurant, Anjung noticed the flag that was developing at the entrance. An aura emanated from the character that was on it. This flag was given to a woman by an old friend. Other than the elegant handwriting, there was nothing special about it. But she had noticed, and for herself, that at such a young age, this guy could see the hidden specialty of the flag. This gave her food for thought, after all, and Jen was not so simple but her view. So she decided to be careful with him. A certain gentleman entered the restaurant on a special carriage carried by people. He immediately spotted Anjung's cat. The Lord knew it was a rare breed of cat and wanted it for himself. But Anjung had no intention of parting ways with his companion. Such an insolent order had escalated to death threats. The master considered himself a combat expert and was willing to kill for this cat. and Zheng decided to accept his challenge. But in the end, the gentleman left as he had come, citing that this scum wasn't worth his effort. The Shosho got concretely nervous and suggested to his brother to run away from here, for the gentleman looked rather dangerous. But the young man preferred to savor the taste of wine. It didn't take long to enjoy as the unknown gentleman returned to Anzhen. He realized that the guy had figured out his schemes since he wasn't even scared. The Lord had indeed gone down the path of lying, though he had made some progress in it. But his gaze was giving him up. With such abilities in the world of lies, he would die a far from better death. Because his teacher told him that there was nothing else to teach him, he decided to gain experience on his own. But this was another lie that Anzhen saw. In fact, there were some problems in the master's courtyard. So he came down from the mountain and started earning a part-time job. Qian Meng deceived many people who should not have been deceived. As a result, he was detained by the law enforcement department. But when asked how Anzhen knew this, just like last time, he replied that he had made it all up. However, the Lord couldn't help but point out the fact that the young man was not an easy person. Qian Meng was in serious trouble, and he knew nothing but lies, so he began to make a living in this way. The Lord actually wanted to eradicate evil and protect good, but unfortunately he was too weak, and could only get to Qian Meng. And Zhen saw that this guy had a clean look and that he looked like an honest person, so he offered to go with him. And Zheng was just short of an assistant, and together they would be able to become famous. It sounded beautiful. But in this world, martial experts ruled. The master thought that the two guys were just ordinary people. They didn't have the ability to become practitioners. In any case, it would be very difficult to do something great. But Anzhen was more optimistic after all. If there was a spirit stone and an assistant to help deceive the spinal cord, they could become martial experts. Someone had already been on the lookout for Anzhen, and in this restaurant, they had found him after all. A member of the Chen family kindly invited the young master to come into the Chen family courtyard. Chen Xiaobai, the young master, wished to see this fellow. That suggestion sounded dubious, but the young master admired Anzhen and provided him with a huge chest of silver. Showa rushed to stop his brother from even thinking of going to those people. But he calmed him down, because in the courtyard of Chen's domain, there were many spirit stones and weapons to be auctioned. Right now, he couldn't directly obtain the spirit stone, but suddenly young Master Chen was giving them such a chance. The guys were at rock bottom, but if they joined together, they could change this world at will. The evil Mr. Chen wished the young man to live his last moments of life well. When he succeeded, only death would be Anzhen's salvation. Anzhen reached the Chen manor rather quickly. The master was waiting for him on the second floor. The lad kept the young gentleman waiting, and he really didn't like waiting. And Zhen didn't expect at all that the young master of the Chen family was about 10 years old. Yet he had already reached the third stage of soul hardening. From this day onwards, the Lord demanded that Zhen follow him everywhere because he would now be Xiaobai's right hand. Only Xiaobai had miscalculated because Anzhen wasn't going to act like that trash by remaining as Mr. Chen's assistant. As far as Xiaobai knew, Anzhen didn't have the ability to practice martial arts, even though his skills are good. But as the master thought, Anzhen is just as trash. Was this really why Xiaobai wanted the trash to help him? Didn't that prove that master was just as much trash? The young master agreed with the statement that fools were not afraid of anything. After all, if Anzhen was not in the Chen family's courtyard, his limbs would have gone to dog food long ago. The two youths caught the auction, just as Anzhen had originally thought. The host was excited to open this auction, as today's and top item is an emerald melon. Everyone knew that spirit stones were divided into emerald, white, red, gold, and purple. This emerald melon was the lowest kind of spirit stones. But with this weight and quality, it could be refined into a white spirit stone that was one stage higher. Without waiting for it to continue, every person in the hall started to haggle and name their price. The price was at least 50,000 silver and more. Xiaobai assumed that Anzhen didn't even know what it was, so he offered to buy the stone so that the guy would realize who he was messing with. But what if Anzhen names the correct price of the goods? What will Xiaobai do then? Of course, he didn't react in any way because Anzhen was from a lower stratum and the Lord knew it. If Anzhen gave the right price for the goods, Xiaobai would reflect on him, perhaps even stop treating him like trash. Anzhen was sure he was right, so he drew everyone's attention to himself. Anzhen decided to bet 1,000 silver. This attracted the resentment of everyone here, especially the young master. An ordinary spirit stone with the size of a fist, it sells on the black market for 5,000 silver. There's another spirit stone inside this emerald melon, but it's no bigger than a peanut. Therefore, Even 1,000 silver would be too much for such a trinket. The host didn't take the young man's words seriously, but since no one bid a higher price, he ordered the stone to be chopped. The emerald melon shards scattered in all directions like leaves. And Jung was absolutely right, and there was indeed a small bead. When the spectators saw this, they were angry that they could be fooled like this. But they were even more amazed by the guy's knowledge. Since he turned out to be right and was just given this little bead that cost pennies, Xiaobai realized that he had underestimated this guy. About the sight of Anzhen was indeed amazing. The auction reveal made the presenter nervous, but he still had one item that was a true prized item, as he put it. The girl brought out a bead similar in size, but white in color. This bead was exchanged for 16 human lives. The magic pill started the price from 150,000 silver. As soon as Anzhen saw this pill, he knew he had to have it. Do you know what it's for? To feed the cat? Seeing the boy strangely approaching them, people started guarding this pillory. But won't the salespeople even let me look at it? They have such a huge store, and they allow themselves to be rude to customers. After all, no one other than Anzhen here knew what it was at all. It was definitely not a magic pill, but the presenters started bickering and proving otherwise. If the guy can't prove his words today, he won't be let off unpunished. Anzhen explained that generally white spiritual stones emit white light, but if you look at it properly, you can see that there is a crack in this pill. People had never encountered something like this before, so they listened to Anzhen carefully. After all, this pill had an anaconda tumor on it, and there was no use for it. An anaconda is a pretty rare animal, and the tumor forms over the 30 years of its life. And what about the white color? It's just venom that is accumulated inside the snake. For a simple tumor, they demanded so much money, people were shocked. And they believed in Jung because he explained everything clearly. If it wasn't for him, the presenter would have sold everything. No wonder he was blacker than a cloud now. Realizing the mood of the crowd, he ordered the guards to throw the pill away. But Anzhen asked to buy it back, as this pill could still serve as an insect repellent. Through his teeth, the man muttered that he doesn't sell a product even if it's broken. But if Anzhen returned the lost 150,000 silver to him, would they sell him the pill after that? The man vowed to become Anzhen's horse if he could do it. Only then would the guy have to get on the man and ride home, so the man would know where his home was. Anzhen sat down and began to carefully search among the shards for something that would help him win the argument. After briefly searching, he found one thing that is at least worth 150,000 silver. If it is not, Anzhen agrees to become the man's horse. Anzhen found a gem of energy that everyone recognized. This gem absorbed energy from the sky and earth, but this gem was depleted. It can't even recover, and there was almost no energy left, although it was already a depleted gem. But it was quite possible to create a pill of life from it, which could prolong a person's life. That's why people were willing to pay more than 150,000. Anzhen, of course, didn't want to ride on the Lord's back, so he told him to apologize and hand over the snake tumor. That would be the end of it. With a satisfied look, he was already picking up his tumor, but the auction head, Huan Fei, stopped them. This 37-year-old seller was worse than a 10-year-old boy, and after all, they had already lost face. So the woman decided to take away his salary for 5 years in advance, and the man had no objections. The woman appreciated Anzhen's talent and intelligence and offered him to stay with her. He was destined for a good future and could become famous. The choice was difficult because the offer was from a pretty girl. But Anzhen remembered his goal and refused. He knew he could become famous without the help of Huan Fei. However, the woman was not very angry, because she realized that everyone had their own directions in life. But if he changed his mind, he could come back at any time. Now it's time for the old men to apologize to Mr. An. The apology was fake, but Mr. An was not that cruel, so he missed this point. The question remained, was it really a snake tumor? No, it's not a snake tumor, it's a real spiritual stone. Plus, this item is many times better than the regular one. Xiaobai was shocked at this turn of events. Anzhen had cruelly humiliated the auction organizers and only to feed his cat. What's the big deal? Xiaoshan was his cat and Anzhen didn't feel sorry for him. Shou started his training but got distracted as soon as he saw his brother. The whole time he was really worried about him and trying to cut back in the backyard. No one had even harmed Anzhen. There was nothing to worry about. But there seems to be another problem. The host closed the auction a while ago because there were some problems. When Anzhen was about to leave and asked Xiaobai about it, he found out that between him and the auction organization, there were some connections. The show, after finding out what happened, decided to take a friend to school and find out what's what. There were very few people there. The masters had left and some guests too, so the lessons were cancelled. As for the guests, it was the Chen family. But on the other hand, this was their chance. After all, there was a conflict between the school and the Chen domain. It was the perfect time to steal the spirit stones. There was nothing to worry about. Shu Shu should find a place to hide, and Zheng decided to see how they were doing. Some huge, bulky man, as soon as he spotted our young man, loomed over him with interest, asking if he was a student of the Ku school. This wasn't just some thug, but an 8th master. If Anzheng is a disciple of their school, then he should urgently go to the auction organization and kill Chen Xiaobai. But why would the Ku school, weaker than the Chen family, dare to raise a hand against them? Could it be that someone is secretly behind all this? First, the relationship between the Chen family and the school is damaged. Then, every single one of them is killed. And after all, the 8th master should know that to go to the organization of auctions is the same as to go and die. Did he really want Anzheng to die there instead of him? What if I do? If Anzheng dares to not go, the master will kill him right now. Is the master's life full of darkness? The 8th master was the first to be sent there to die, but he pretends to be a smart man and seeks out someone to die for him no matter what. The battle between them was heating up, but Anzheng was not going to give up, no matter how formidable the master seemed to be. But he didn't seem to have any intention of killing the guy. The 8th master kept pressing his disciple to go to organize the auction now and kill Xiaobai, then the master would probably spare him. Suddenly, a small pebble hit the huge master's foot. A seemingly small pebble, but it knocked the bully to the floor. Who was that daredevil? It was that woman from the inn. She expected the guy to run away as soon as possible and tried to help him out. This woman really did hide her strength. Her kindness and grace, Anzheng would never forget. But he still had things to do here, so he couldn't run away so fast. Except that Master was comparing Anzheng's strength to the bite of a mosquito. To confront the enemy on a more serious level, Anzheng decided to borrow the flag and in. As soon as he took the flag in his hands, it was as if a warrior's shadow had formed behind him, ready to defend him. This flag was stronger than 1,000 swords. It literally chopped the master into small pieces. He had no chance against this flag. Previously, Anzheng had sensed the strong aura hidden within this flag, but there was no way he had expected such a burst of energy. Yet how disappointing it was, for this flag could kill even a god. Anzheng took it to kill such an ant. Anjing understood his guilt and apologized. After all, he didn't do it on purpose. He had no other choice. The woman didn't blame him, but asked for more, that he not show up here. After dealing with the 8th master, Anzheng appeared outside the school building for the 2nd time in a day. Masters didn't expect to find him here, much less alone. Anzheng confessed to killing the 8th master, and thought that the Ku school would not be able to forgive him for it. But he didn't need to worry. 6th master wasn't here to kill him. He was disappointed that he had not recognized Anzheng's talent earlier. The 6th master must have already known that the Ku school had become just an arrow in the hands of other people. It was true. Every member of the Ku school was an arrow that once shot had no return path. It didn't even matter if they were being used. Right now, the school couldn't control this place. Only Qin Xiaobai must die. The 6th master was not afraid that the arrow released halfway through would break because his family was in the wrong hands. But he didn't want to wait any longer. To go into organizing auctions, first he had to inform the school. And he was going to go to the organization to finish off Chen Xiaobai. Just killing an organization's clients equals destroying the reputation of the institution. It wasn't going to be allowed through the doorstep. Blood started to flow from his body, but he wasn't going to give up and decided he was going to go no matter what. In such a case, action had to be taken. The 6th master was killed to death. Great. Now it was time to bury the master, and Anzheng decided to give him the funds that the master had once given him. And Zhen himself entered the building without any problems. Once again, the woman met with the little master, and Anzheng didn't even know what to call this woman. Therefore, she introduced herself as Huan Fei Fei, but the little master could call her mistress. Since they had become brother and sister, it was impossible for Anzheng to think of an outsider. Huan Fei immediately realized that the boy had a crush on her. Once upon a time, there was a boy as stubborn as Anshen. He talked just as recklessly, and sadly, he died before he had even lived 10 years. What a joy, after all. Anzheng is over 11 years old. Surely he will live longer. Zhuang was counting on the fact that he would definitely become very strong in the future. But right now, he didn't have enough connections. Anzheng possessed too few acquaintances. Xiaobai noticed his guest and immediately called him over. As it turned out, the Chen family had been destroyed. The young master was very angry. Now, it was no wonder that the sixth master wanted to enter this place so badly. It appeared that he had come to eliminate the root of all troubles. The organization can support Xiaobai, but he gave them a very precious thing of the Chen family. Now they must guard him day and night. Xiaobai planned revenge. But did he know who his abuser was? Xiaobai was unaware of it because his father hid it from him and refused to talk about it. One could judge that Xiaobai's offender was definitely very strong. He would not hold back. But the Chen family knew one place was the magic gate. Surely it was the reason why the disaster happened. Therefore, Xiaobai's first goal was the magic gate. He wanted to go there and train and become stronger as a result. And Zheng could partner up with Xiaobai and subsequently be bathed in luxury. Probably many people would have agreed to such a proposal. But Zheng literally sent this proud turkey away. It seems Zheng never learned to appreciate what he was given. But he could help Xiaobai trap the offender and carry out his revenge. The boys had already walked up to the school that evening where the show was supposed to be waiting for them. But they met someone they least expected to see. The young master seemed pale at having met a traitor in his circles. And Zheng still wondered why he had so much wealth and power, but never expected him to be a fraud and a traitor. It was a rogue like him who was able to create all this, destroy the family he served in, and in addition, ignite a war between the families. He didn't even hide his appearance and spoke in the open. It was a pity, one thing, that until the very end of their existence, the Chen never guessed who had killed them. But why did he do it? They were family, and had given him so much. The man thought it was all wrong. After all, it all belonged to him. He had spent so many years solving most of their problems, and they were ungrateful trash who basked in the rays of his glory. They treated him like a dog. If he kills Xiaobai, who will become the head of the Chen family, but an obstacle arose between them in the form of Zheng, who was protecting Xiaobai with himself. The man was counting on the fact that maybe now these guys would start begging for mercy. But that wouldn't work, because Zheng had already been guilty of breaking his son's arm earlier. But had he ever heard or seen Zheng's cat? It would seem like bullshit until Zheng fed the cat a magic pill. Xiaoshan had completely absorbed all the energy and was now Zheng's familiar. But Chen Pu still didn't look impressed and thought that he was being joked with. But how could he resist such a large aura? Against such an aura, he looks like a little bug about to be trampled on. Chen Pu had long since reached the 5th step of spirituality, and was confident in his strength, so he had no doubt that he would kill everyone here who was not good for him. But would it be interesting if a 3rd stage expert killed a 5th stage expert? It was a confrontation between two different forces. Xiaobai was confused for a moment, but he immediately pulled himself together and threw himself into a fight with his former subordinate. But it wasn't the real Chen Xiaobai. The mask slowly came off and it became apparent that this was Zheng's recent acquaintance. Once the deception was completely gone, Chen Pu realized that he had been fooled and tried to find the real nephew. But Xiaobai was quicker and did what his uncle had already done to him, stabbing him in the back. The blood gushed from his body and mouth, but not red, but black, for that was his soul. You should never tell your opponent your plans until you've won. Xiaobai once said that he wanted revenge, and in the end, he got his revenge. All that was left was to wish my uncle a pleasant journey to hell. And Zheng also promised that he would lure out a traitor for Xiaobai. He kept his promise. How could Xiaobai thank him now? His request was simple. Zheng wanted someone to stay out of his way and not put obstacles in his way. Did Zheng let Xiaoshan in earlier in order to intimidate Xiaobai? Did Zheng know that the young master had once wanted to kill him? He only knew about those mysterious gates, but it was clear that Xiaobai would want to kill him so that he wouldn't blab to anyone. Xiaobai laughed unkindly, for this was the first time he had met such a worthy opponent. He believed that they were still bound to meet Zheng someday, and asked that he would by no means dare to fall far behind him. After all, if he killed him easily in the future, it would be too boring for him. When everyone had already dispersed, we should have unleashed the show. He'll be fine, but he's passed out now. Will the gentleman be able to transform himself into this rotten minister? This was no problem at all for the guy. He had all the necessary tools for the transformation. 100 alterations clothes can change to fit any size and color. It was a treasure of Qianmeng. The plan was this. In the form of a minister, Li Shui would go to the Chen family, then ask someone to be a guide and escort him to the treasury. And Zhen only needed 24 spirit stones. And other than that, Li Shui could grab himself anything. For the sake of money, of course, he was ready to take risks, so he decided not to waste time and immediately went on a mission. It was probably less than an hour later, and Li Shui had successfully completed his mission. It was a difficult mission for him. It seemed as if he almost died of fear. but he did everything. Showa still hadn't woken up and was still sleeping sweetly on the cold ground. Li Shui had a brilliant idea, and Zhenyu was left to watch and see how the guy would wake him up. It probably wasn't the most pleasant awakening for Sha, but it was 100%. It would be impossible not to smell such an odor. That's why Sha woke up screaming, "Run! Quick!" The toilet exploded. The guys would almost die laughing. At least something about this evening was funny. I actually feel sorry for the guy. But the joke's funny. Now that everyone was awake, it was time to look at Li Shui's looted treasures. It would surely be enough to wash his spine. In addition, the guy grabbed a few 100,000 silver tickets. They can be exchanged for silver, and now you don't have to worry about food and clothing anymore. The guys now had spirit stones, plus Anjin knew someone who could wash their spines. But there was no certainty that she would agree. And Jing, in spite of the woman's request, led her back to Auntie Ye once again. But she absolutely did not want to see him. And Zheng wanted Auntie to help them wash their spines, but certainly not for nothing. He was also willing to help her with Xiao Qidao as well. The woman didn't quite know what he was talking about, since her daughter seemed to be fine. Xiao Qi had pretty good data. Wouldn't her mother want her daughter to train? Auntie Ye probably wouldn't be able to protect her throughout her life. But such a favor made her even more angry. She was ready to already attack Anjung, gathered all her anger and hatred in her palms. She directed the sharp icicles of ice through the door behind which Anjen stood. The woman wasn't going to feel sorry for the boy. In front of him was now an angry mother who didn't understand how he knew about the natural data and her daughter. She held a sword in her hand because she did not know what danger threatened her or her daughter. To prevent the woman from doing something bad, the man stopped her while lowering his sword. It was probably a familiar man. Anjung was forced to leave for now. But since that was the case, he decided to give the small notebook away, with the hope that he could help Xiao Qidao with it. To miss such help, the woman, of course, did not want to, and caught the notebook in her hands. Without even reaching the house, she immediately decided to see what was written in the notebook. And she was extremely surprised, because she didn't expect to see the training methods of the law department there. The man was clearly not expected here, so why had he come? He liked that guy, and he was talking a case, because Xiao Qidao really needs to grow up, and she also needs trustworthy friends. In the past, Aunt Yeo moved to this town to escape trouble, and Mu Changyun came here to become the town's mayor. The woman was afraid that this man would cause trouble for her and her daughter again. But Mu Chang'an really wanted to protect them. After all, it was his brother's request before he died, and he couldn't help but fulfill it. Memories of the family member caused anger and fierce sadness after all. This was the person who died in Mu Chang'an's arms. Aunt Yeo thought that Mu Changyun had killed him on purpose, but it wasn't true because he loved that man as much as she did. Mu Changyan assumed that that boy had been possessed by another soul. And reborn souls are often very strong. One day, all of Xiao Qi's family would die. Auntie Ye should go help wash the young man's spine, and in the future, he would always protect Xiao Qidao. Mu Changsun swore to protect those girls, but the poison had already penetrated his organs, so he would definitely die before Auntie Yeo. He actually opened the Huangxi library for Xiao Qidao. And since that was the case, let him and Xiao Qidao come together. Mu Changyan and Yeo had no future, but the girl named Xiao Qidao did. After a long and arduous night, Auntie Yeo made up her mind after all and came to the boys who were idling on their lawn. It wasn't just Anjung who wanted his spine cleaned, but also Shou. Since that's the case, they should promise something to her. One day the two of them together with Xiao Qi should go to Huangxi Library. The Huangxi Library's name alone caused Sha to be frantically terrified. Without connections or geniuses, it was simply impossible to get in. But they didn't need to worry about that. The important thing for them was to promise that they would protect Xiao Qidao. Without any thought, Anjung, of course, immediately agreed. The deal was a success. The old blacksmith was completely devoted to his craft. He was the best of the best in his trade, so this time he was approached by the boy who had been wronged by An Zhen. His request was to change his face as well as heal his arm, for which he was willing to pay with the seal of Chen's domain. Changing the face was a piece of cake for this master. But the hand was more difficult. It could not be cured, except to detach and insert someone else's arm. So the young man immediately ordered his ward to cut off some hands of children about his age. The more the better. In that closet he could pick out any face he wanted. The smell in there was disgusting, it reeked of human flesh. But that didn't stop the guy from choosing his favorite faces. He made these changes to get back at Anjung. The guys were already heading to the three of them to the previously appointed place. They were cracking jokes and feeling quite good with each other in the same company. The girl was very small, so Anjung offered to carry her on his back. She might be tired, but her mother had once said that to become an expert, she should not succumb to fatigue. The path of an expert was indeed very difficult, but if one learned not to give up, you'd already passed the halfway point. The magic gate was recruiting new disciples and would only settle them at a certain time. Parents did everything they could to get their kids into school. There, and only a small fraction of kids were able to get in. The Huangshi Library was opened by the city's mayor, Mu Changyong, the most noble person in the city. Showa still doubted whether they would be able to get in, even with Aunt Yeo washing their spines. And Jen didn't want to worry about it and trusted Auntie Ye. If she asked like this, she definitely had some plan. When they reached the library, they could see a huge crowd of people who wanted to go there. It was not a place where commoners were allowed to go, not being human enough to get in. And after all, this was no ordinary person, but a Chu healer. He asked that at least Liu Er could try to pass the test. If she passed the test, she could stay to study in the library. The healer gave 2 little gold. He's not feeding the homeless. If he doesn't get out of here, the man will have to let the dogs on him. Xiao Qido requested that she and Anjun help the 2 of them. The healer and his apprentice were completely upset. Liu Er was offering to leave. But the healer wasn't just losing his reputation for nothing. It was so that the girl could train there, and now she wanted to give up. Who would want her later? Old man Cho kept begging the Lord on his knees and offered anything to let his girl study. But the gentleman got fed up with all this and decided not to tolerate it any longer and let the dogs down. But that's when Xiaoshan came to the rescue. The pussycat prevented the dog from reaching Liu Er and became like a stone wall. Such a belligerent kitty will be feared not only by the dog, but also by any other critter. Everyone immediately turned their attention to the owner of this cat. Liu Er immediately recognized Anjung, who stood up to defend the healer. He decided to give the girl some help and gave her 1 spiritual stone. And not just like that, but for the girl to throw that rock in the face of the creep who wouldn't let them through. But it couldn't be like this. Liu Er was a kind soul and didn't want to stoop to such a level, much less throw away such precious things. If the girl didn't want to do it, Shaw decided to do it. The guy was pretty accurate and got right in the man's nose. Yes, so much so that he bled. If he didn't want gold, could he finally settle for 1 spirit stone? Or would that not be enough for him? But they finally bargained. The man was willing to accept the spirit stone. Anjung was surprised that a person like this worked in the library and was even a little disappointed. Anjung suddenly changed his mind, for he regretted his choice. This was just a training session and could be done anywhere. They headed away like this, but someone stopped them. The mayor and founder of this library graciously invited them to his place. They should have known that entering his library was the best choice. If it wasn't for Xiao Qido, Auntie Ye wouldn't even wash their spines, so Anjung needs to think better about his decision. His voice was immediately transmitted to Anjung's brain. It seems that he didn't want to be found out about things related to Auntie Ye. If he was capable of this, then he is definitely strong. And Zhen decided to refer to Xiao Qi Dao. He didn't want to go to the Huangshi Library, but even so, he could help her train. The little girl relied on her brother Anjung for everything. Where he goes, she goes. It was now clear to everyone that Anzhen was taking responsibility for her training. Besides, if the line on his neck was cut to his forehead, the man would definitely die. And if he dies, how will he defend Xiao Qi Dao? It was quite possible that he was strong before, but now he was weak to the extreme. The situation was getting heated, so Anjung proposed a bet. The guys will go there to train, but in 6 months, 2 students must compete. If the guys lose, they'll all do whatever dirty work Mu Chanyan tells them to do. So it was decided, if Anjung lost, she would even wash his feet. From today, the guys would be living here, but Anjung felt it was also necessary to clarify their opinions about it once more. Just then, Old Man Chu, who wanted Liu Er to train in the Huangshi Library, came over. Absolutely every one of them wanted to stay with Anjhen. The Shosho even thought that it was his destiny to follow his friend. Xiao Qidao was also willing to follow him, but she was too small to decide such a thing, so Anjung needed to ask Auntie Yo's opinion. Mom was just being facetious and didn't understand why they didn't go to the library. Before answering this question, Anjun asked his own. What kind of person did Auntie wanted to raise Xiao Qidao to be? She just wanted the girl to have her own powers to protect herself, and of course to grow up safe. Going to the Huangshi Library was indeed a good way to become stronger. But Anjun didn't want Xiao Qi to grow up surrounded by evil and violence. He wished for Xiao Qidao to become a noble, responsible, cleansing the evil on earth, and a fighter for justice person. A herd of horses saddled by a squad of Daiying fighters stopped near the library. No one thought they would find it. To find Mr. Mu Yen, ththese guys went around all 16 Da Yen countries. But he kept hiding in the shadows and not showing himself in public. Mu Chang'en was a member of the royal family, and now Da En needed him back. But if he refuses to go, the soldiers will blow up the whole station. The first thing that was important was for them not to notice Xiao Qidao. The emperor's mother wanted to take his place. If she knew about Xiao Qidao's existence, it would be dangerous. In his mind, Mu Changying was telling Auntie Yo to return to Daying with him, and Xiao Qidao would be temporarily safe. After realizing the whole situation, Auntie Yo clarified whether Anzhen would help Xiao Qidao, in case an unforeseen calamity happened to her. Of course he was willing to treat this little girl like his sister. Lastly, the mother admonished her child to train together with Anzhen, to be strong not only in body but also in spirit, to respect her brother like her own mother. Leaving her child, Auntie Yeo asked Anzheng to take care of her until she grew up. Her tears didn't subside even when she was in the carriage. Yeo knew that Xiao Qidao would not be able to escape such a fate, and neither would Mu Chanyen. In order to support Yeo in some way, Mu Chang'en found her hand and squeezed it tightly, letting her know that she wasn't alone. A few students and Tianqi school had a bet with the library that they would have a competition in 6 months, so Mu Chanyen asked that the library not be closed after he left. The soldier decided that he would temporarily replace Mu Changyong as deputy head of Chu Changchen. This man's character is very responsible and can stay. The girl felt as if her mother had abandoned her, but Anzhen hurriedly reassured her that she should never doubt her mother's love, for she had her own hidden sorrows. When they win against the Huangxi Library, they will go to Dayan to meet Auntie Yi. The current state of Tianzi School was very sad. The building was completely dilapidated and broken, and there was not a soul in the school except one man who thought Anzheng was too naive and arrogant. There wasn't a single master here, and only these guys thought they could defeat the Huangxi Library. This man was the guard here, and Zhen immediately slipped him a bag of silver to buy some normal clothes. When the school does well, he will become a model here. Since the signboard was broken, Anzheng suggested changing it to a new one and renaming the school to Tianqi Sect. Everyone unanimously decided that Anzheng would be the head of the sect. With 6 months left in the competition, they are bound to win, but first they need to get out. The guys immediately scattered to their duties, so that they could handle and clean up the sect more quickly. While they were cleaning up Shaoqi, Dao came across a huge building. This building was a book depository, but what attracted more was what stood in front of it. This one was a 9-star machine, and Zheng didn't expect it to be here. The old man, in turn, was surprised that the young man knew about the apparatus of the 9 stars. One could assume that the old man was not a simple man, but he did not think so. Old man Huo had guarded this place for a long time. He knew a little about the affairs of experts and nothing more. This school was once owned by the former mayor of the city, but after the current mayor killed him, the place is vacant. The city's current mayor, Mu Chanyong, is a scholar, and to demonstrate his power, he opened a library near this school. When recruiting new students, you can't do anything without the 9-star apparatus. Just put your hand in the red circle, and the apparatus would show the level and potential of the student. The more stars, the higher the potential. But there are very few with 9 stars. A student with 8 stars was considered a genius. Then the best student in the school lit up 3 stars. This 9-star apparatus was standing for a very long time, so Anzheng asked the Shosho to put a spirit stone in there, because he needed energy to make it work. This stone was worth several tens of thousands of silver. Now the apparatus owed Shosha all 9 stars. When the young man put up his hand, a 1.5 stars was highlighted to him. This seemed like the lowest score, but in fact a low score is actually half a star. Now it was Liu Er's turn. She was given 4 stars. Even the best student in the school had only reached 3 stars. The next in line asked Xiao Qidao to put her hand, and Sung had to lift her up. The apparatus shone with the most powerful light. 8 stars shone on this mysterious apparatus. The girl was definitely gifted. But what about Anzheng? He didn't even want to try, because without any tests, he thought he was a genius. But really, he only had half a star, less than all the guys. He purposely didn't check it in the sight of others, only deciding to check it when he was alone. The former head of Daiyi's law department was in such a body of trash at the moment. Even with all the effort, it's impossible to reach the top. What kind of revenge is there to talk about? But half a star, so what? And what's a decrepit body? It was only the initial step down, nothing like that. If you try hard enough, there will definitely be hope. Xiao Shan somehow escaped from his master's hands and jumped onto the 9-star apparatus. The kitty cat started digging through it. Was there really some secret in there? even ate a magic pill. The cat was probably stronger than Anzeng. The apparatus really wasn't that simple. It was unexpected to see the machine itself at all, but to see such a thing in the machine. Almost all regular 9-star apparatuses come from the merchandise department. Rumor has it that the department's merchandise division is even richer than the whole country. The department's goods department. Not only is it the most famous magic weapon factory, but it is also a clan of experts. And Zheng was really weaker than his cat, since he didn't find the distinctive features of this machine. Xiaoshan's eyes were extraordinary, usually referred to as the eyes of samsara. No precious thing could hide from those eyes. But for some reason, these eyes suddenly appeared on an ordinary cat. Who is this old man really, since he knows so much? In this town, all the residents were without a future or aspirations, eventually dying far away from their homeland. And Zheng could guess that this old man Huo was the master of the department's goods department. But he hadn't heard this name from others for a long time, so he decided to tell a story about the department's goods department. Once upon a time, there lived a certain father, working in the department's goods department. Now and then developed new weapons. He paid little attention to his son. The only son striving to surpass and suppress others was making trouble everywhere. Finally, Da Yi took notice. A father who wanted to protect his son went to this city with him, Yang Guo. There his son defeated everyone, became mayor of the town, and built the Tianzi school. The father knew that his son was always getting into trouble and did not think about the consequences. Sooner or later he would have to pay the price. Therefore, by combining the 6 purple spirit stones, father created a thing that could prolong life. But unfortunately, he never got the chance to use it. Mu Chang'an severely wounded his son. The wound was too deep. Before he could use the magic item, the son died in his father's arms. Disappointed, the father hid the thing in the apparatus of the 9 stars. Back then, it took old man Huo a whole 36 years to create this thing. What was inside the apparatus is the supreme commodity of purple spirit stones. The former mayor of the city turns out to be old man Huo's son. He had kept quiet about it for many years, and the fact that he was talking a lot today, the old man asked the head not to consider it strange. The mention of Anzheng being the head made him very confused, and he asked not to call him that because it was just a joke between him and his guys. But old man Huo was completely serious. He thought that Anzheng should become the sect head, for here were his son's endeavors. When Anzheng said that he would rename the place and defeat Huangshi Library, old man Huo realized that Tianqi School should continue to exist. The Heavenly Seal was a small world. It contained the gateway to this world. It was called a Heavenly Seal because it could seal time even in the heavens. In this world, time flowed much slower than in the present. If you train here, the result will be 10 times better and even several hundred times better. Also, with a small amount of effort, you can get not a small result. This place was amazing, and Zheng felt as if he was in a fairy tale, for he had never seen such beauty anywhere. The mountains were like swords piercing the sky. The river was like a living snake winding among the trees, which were like a separate art. Huo gave the Heavenly Seal to Anzheng. This thing could float with him into the rivers and lakes after his death, which would cause a lot of trouble. Therefore, the old man decided to give it to a lucky person. He thought it was better than the Heavenly Seal ending up in the wrong hands. Anzheng was ready to jump with happiness. Perhaps he didn't even realize that such a thing was in his hands. Old man Huo immediately encouraged him to go train. With his physical abilities, Anzheng should have hurried to defeat Huangshi. Huo didn't want gratitude because he thought Anzheng was a fortunate person. Man had 2 sides, evil and good, and deeds had 2 kinds, good and bad. Huo hoped that stingy desires would not cloud Anzheng's mind or obscure the Heavenly Seal. Though time was much slower here than outside, but the bleeding hardly stopped. The result of the training was negligible. Anzheng decided to train leisurely. It would be pointless to rush. After returning to the sect, Anzheng caught such a picture. Shosho was literally wriggling in pain, and the healer didn't even know what to do to help. His hand was completely numb. This was the work of the scum from the Huangshi Library. They were coming for revenge. The followers of the library despised them. They saw that the boys were weak, and with such capabilities, they dared to challenge the library. If the mayor of the city didn't make a deal with them, that scum would finish them off immediately. Through the pain, Shoshu made a promise that he would definitely bring back the reputation of the sect. But he was just after the spinal wash, and those people had already gone through soul hardening. It's normal that Sha couldn't beat them. In half a year, Anzheng would make Shoshu much stronger than them. In the meantime, This injury had to be cured with the medicinal herb from the Tianman Mountain. This was indeed an effective method, but this herb was guarded by a beast. The Tianman Mountain was full of dangers. If an ordinary person set foot there, they might not come back. Anjing was well aware of this, so Shoushou decided to put it in a more comfortable place to begin with. Old Man Chu didn't lose hope, and was still trying to get Liu Er out of this place. All this time he had failed to do so. Would he succeed now? The Tianman Mountain was known for its dangers, and Zheng might not be able to return. Liu Er wasn't going anywhere. There were a few people left in the school. Old Man Cho only wished the girl well. She had 4 stars. He didn't want her to simply waste her talent. He saw that the Tianzi sect was just a game of a few children. It was unlikely that they would teach her martial arts here. But the girl had faith in Anzhen, so she unhesitatingly decided to stay here. Near the city, the grass had long since been cleared away, so Anzheng had to go deeper into the forest. The only thing left to do was to try his luck on Tianman Mountain. Tianman Mountain was the place where Anzhen had fallen in his past life. Would he be able to cope now? The first job was almost done. He found the necessary herb that grew under the tree. Just as he was about to rip it off, someone else's blood started flowing onto his hand. Lifting his gaze upwards, Anzheng noticed many corpses of low-level beasts on the tree. Lin Yi's bird flew right at him. It was obvious that it was hungry, and now it wanted to eat Anzheng's living body. This seemed to be the bird's territory, but it was bad because there was nowhere to run. There was no road. The bird did not stop chasing Anzheng, so he had no choice but to jump into the abyss. It was better to jump into the abyss than to be caught in the clutches of that thing. With difficulty, but he managed to grasp the sprouted root and now held on to it. But the bird still kept up, and now there was really nowhere to go. Anzheng had to take this blow, but fortunately, he was in a cave where this bird's paws could not reach. He was wounded, but alive and now perhaps even safe. In his previous life, Anzheng would have easily finished him off and wouldn't be as embarrassed as he was now. The kitty decided to jump out of his arms and lead her master somewhere. They ended up stumbling upon a secret passage just inside the mountain. Without waiting for the master to settle in, Xiaoshan rushed up the stairs. She didn't even know where those stairs led, and that bird was still near the cave entrance. Oh well, we'll just have to go and see. This road was definitely built by humans, but there were many traces of blood on the wall, making this cave very creepy. What was going on here? At the exit of the cave, one could see a place hidden from the human eye. It was quiet and peaceful, and there was not a single hostile creature in sight. It was also very important that there were a lot of herbs, and among the vegetation, Anzheng noticed the longevity mushroom, of which there were many. The guy's eyes were literally scattered with such a variety of plants. Walking a little further, he noticed a mountain ginseng. There was an entire garden of medicinal herbs hiding here. Not only were there rare herbs, but there were also herbs that grew in few places in the entire world. Now it was clear why Lin Yi was guarding the passage. If other people found out about this place, there would be a bloody war. There was also a hut at this location. This place was not without a host. The house wasn't old, though it was a bit unkept. Anzheng decided to take a chance and look inside. It was completely dark inside. In the middle of the whole room, a man with long gray hair could be seen, who did not react in any way to the appearance of the guest. It was a woman who seemed to be 200 years old. In front of her lay a clay tablet where it was written, "I have been guarding the coffin for 500 years, until the end, without having met the Lord." As I looked back at the human world, I wondered who would be the lucky one. This ancestor resided here secretly. The body was aged but did not rot, perhaps because of the smell of medicinal herbs. This person had become decrepit and shriveled, but still had a strong spirit, however. She didn't look like an ordinary person. And Zheng decided to confess that he really needed some medicinal herbs to save his friend, and promised that he wouldn't touch the woman's garden. The body that seemed to be dead suddenly moved. The sudden movement really frightened the pussycat and Anzheng himself. The half-dead man's hand was pointing directly at the door as if hinting at something. After paying attention to the plaque, Anzheng realized that if she had been guarding a coffin for 500 years, it meant that this coffin was somewhere on the mountain. It remained to be clarified. Did she mean that she wanted Anzhen to bury her by that coffin? Realizing from the nod that the two sides were correctly understood, Anzheng agreed to carry her just so she could rest in peace. There were even steps to this spot, making it very easy to climb up and find your way around. At last they reached the whole ice castle, the entrance to which was closed, but as soon as they approached, the doors automatically opened. In the middle, one could observe a superb interior, as if this place was meant for a king or queen. Finding the coffin wasn't a problem. It was in a prominent place. And Jung apologized for barging in like that, but the old man could rest now. He also promised that he wouldn't tell anyone about this place. A beaded bracelet fell out of a completely withered hand. Jung immediately picked it up and said that he would help put it on again. But the lid of the coffin was covered with ice in an instant. Now this man was at rest. Surely the bracelet was a gift for Jung if the man chose to close this coffin himself. Jung didn't even wear this bracelet. He just held it in his hands. But in an instant, all the beads on the bracelet flew apart of their own accord. They changed their color and forcibly wrapped around Jung's arm as if he was now their master. Each of the 13 beads had a different meaning. After they got to know their host, different patterns would form on each bead. Blood beads are one of the top quality magical jewelry. Now these beads belong to Jung. Magical jewelry, like medicinal herbs and spirit stones, is divided into emerald, red, white, gold, and purple. If you count with the heavenly seal, there are no more than 200 purple goods in the entire world. These beads were purple goods. Strange patterns began to appear on them, which may have been caused by Anjen's blood. According to the ability of the host, the strength of these beads can change. The stronger the master was, the more power was stored in them. But right now, Anjen could only use 2 or 3 beads. This bead was a space to store things. How big it is would depend on the strength of the owner. A bead could even store a garden, the one outside. Another one could store the rest of the strength. When the host was in a dangerous situation or injured, it could be used to heal. Even though the beads only absorbed 1% of Anjen's blood, they were still of great benefit. It was incomprehensible what had happened in this place. To have such a strong and great ancestor forced to guard the coffin for 500 years, even if the body had already become decrepit. Kitty tried to suggest that these 2 corpses also had magical jewelry on them, and featured swords that were very rare. But one thing the cat has to remember is that they can take things without the owner, but they can't take guns from these 2. Suddenly, something incredibly strange began to happen. The corpse glowed red, the floor began to crack, shards of ice fell everywhere. Jung began to fail. He didn't even have a chance to grab onto anything. But he managed to move to the other side in time, and noticed the huge cliff in front of him. The ice completely melted, as if the rocks hanging above it had contributed to it with their own warmth. The huge garden began to disappear right before the young man's eyes. The garden became several dozen times smaller, and shone with a bright golden color. All his energy, everything he was made of, all the vegetation, it fit into one bead. This island had started to completely collapse. Pretty soon, there would be nothing left here. Jung had to park a little to get out of this trap. But he stumbled and started falling down the chasm. He could have crashed into the rocks, but he was extremely lucky and fell into the nest. It was probably the nest of Lin Yi's bird, so let's not jump to the conclusion that he was lucky. Someone's green eyes began to sparkle in this pitch-black darkness, and Jen came closer and closer to him. It was definitely not a bird. It was already a dead man who was stuck among the branches, and had been here for a long time for sure. The red stiletto caught Jung's attention. He bent over to look closer and saw that it was the stiletto jewelry of Shu Maiden. She had worn this stiletto as a child as well, and how it could have ended up here was a question. Shu Maiden had once accompanied him on a campaign when Anjen was going to the Yan Kingdom, hoping to rescue Prince Chen. The girl had a bad feeling. Therefore, right from her hair, she gave him her red hairpin. Not only was it an incredibly sharp purple-grade object, but it was also a valuable item from Tian Hao's courtyard. The girl gave this item to Anjing, and he literally shone with happiness. Wasn't it love? Maybe the guy was joking or not, but either way, the girl went into a blush. She only thought that Hao Palace and the Law and Order Department were closely related. As long as Anjen was fine, Tian Hao Palace would definitely help him. When Fang Cheng was attacked, apart from the 19 masters, there were 3 others. They didn't hide their intentions, but they didn't hide their faces either. However, right now, Anjung couldn't even guess who it was. In order to find some clue, Anjung began to remove the mask under which the critter was already feeding. He saw a 3rd eye on that man's forehead. Only members of the Yang family had 3 eyes from birth. Apparently, the Yang family's men were one of the people who ambushed them back then. It must have been the gang that attacked to take the treasure from Fang Zheng. Apparently, this man died in these mountains, causing the red stiletto to be left here. Those people took the red stiletto from him and most likely went to Shu Maiden, and when the girl saw the stiletto, she believed that this person was Fang Zhen's friend. This world was too small. The bird was most likely heading to its home, so Anjen hurriedly scurried away to avoid becoming its dinner. But alas, the bird was much quicker to grab the guy in its clutches. It was so huge that one Anjung could fit into its one paw. The young man would only have a chance to escape when it descended. Now that moment had come, but then he would have to bathe. To get free, the stiletto was just right, for it was sharper than a knife. The guy dropped into a body of water. It's unlikely this wild bird would want to dive for him. But she did something else. Lin Yi created a powerful whirlpool at the same place where Anjen fell, and she used her feathers like arrows that pierced that water. Luckily, Anjung swam to the surface alive and well. Surprisingly, the bird also decided to leave the place. But why would it do that? It had been hunting him all this time, and now it decided to abandon him. Something strange was happening under the water, and Jung noticed the dead body of a snake. The body looked like it had been tried to be torn into pieces. Was there a more horrible creature in the water for this? In any case, we had to get out of here, and sooner rather than later. The bird didn't fly far away as Anjung had hoped. Now he was in full view of it. Now he could only rely on luck. But suddenly, it changed its trajectory, and very close to a huge yellow catfish. It would seem how much power this bird has to get such a fish. But such a big fish managed to escape and was back under the bottom of the water. Anjen and his kitten managed to swim to shore. It was good to see that Xiaoshan was fine and didn't drown. But as for Anjen, his ribs, arm bones, and legs were broken too. He couldn't even lift his arm to get the medicinal herbs. Blood beads are certainly able to gather the remaining strength after all the attacks, but right now, they were useless. This Qianmen Mountain definitely disliked Anjung. Every time he visited it, he ended up getting injured. Anjen wanted the kitty to leave, because if she stayed here she might meet a demonic beast, and then she would definitely die. Things were bad, and Jung was now on the verge of life and death. Only chance could help him. He had two strongest weapons, and he couldn't even save himself now. Kitty decided to leave, and there wasn't even anyone to call. The wound was big, and Jung had lost all hope that he could live and prepared to die here under this stone. Once upon a time it was going to be destroyed, because it was unfit for someone. His best friend wanted to kill him for his own gain. An Yuzheng has been having scary dreams where he is constantly running away from someone and fighting for his life. Recent events have influenced these dreams. But like a light at the end of the tunnel, he saw his friends trying to reach him, but he couldn't hear. These dreams gave him no rest, and he could not rest in peace. He woke up in a cold sweat from these nightmares. But one thing in the dream turned out to be real in reality. The guys did go looking for him and finally found him. Xiaoshan led them to where Anjen was lying. Now he wouldn't die. He had these people with him, and they were worth living for. Not for revenge, but for these people. Completely all bandaged up, Anjen had just opened his eyes in his sect. The friends were constantly guarding and waiting for the little brother to finally wake up. Xiao Shidao in particular was very worried about Anjing, but he wouldn't admit to his pain. As soon as Xiaoshan rushed over to Shosho, she grabbed onto his leg with all her might. It was clear that something had happened to Anjen. Anjing had been unconscious for so many days, and if he hadn't woken up, Tianqi school would probably be gone. But they told him in hell that his friends here missed him and wouldn't take him away. In his half-dead state, Anjung was in the mood to joke, which Liu Er noted with displeasure. The girl had not slept at all these days. She had been bandaging Anjing, treating and caring for him. So he wouldn't dare to offend her from now on. And actually, Shaw also thought that they were very suitable for each other, and so cute, but it was definitely unnecessary. And it turns out Anjung's wife also fights. What nonsense! Anjung lay down and saw that Liu Er was just very embarrassed. Shosho should have stopped teasing her. Old man Hu decided to visit the sick man. He asked the boys to leave him alone with Anjing, which they did. When the old man was examining Anjung, he saw a pearl bracelet on his wrist. Did Anjung know what it was? It was a ritual purple pearl. It replenished blood. But was it also familiar to Huo? With a serious look, Huo wondered if he had found the pearls along with the withered body, to which Anjung chose to lie. If Anjung had taken the bracelet himself, it would have been much better. Old man Huo had heard something about these pearls. There was even a terrible legend. In ancient books, it was written that the blood-replenishing pearls were the work of inhuman hands. It was created in the underworld. Those who obtained these pearls did not die of their own accord. The pearl needed fresh blood. It memorized all its past owners and constantly absorbed the energy of their blood. If a person could not maintain his strength, sooner or later the bracelet would dry him up, turning him into a mummy. Moreover, pearls are under a spell. If the previous owner of the pearl cast a curse before his death, that bracelet will absorb the energy of subsequent owners, gradually bring him back to life. It couldn't be avoided. There was now a bond between the bracelet and Anjung that couldn't be broken. Even if he chopped off his arm or threw away the bracelet and ran to the other side of the world. If the past owner recovered quickly, the pearls wouldn't need new blood, and nothing would change for Anjung. At least he would keep his life. One could only hope that the former owner would recover much faster than Anjung. He was weak, and didn't even have a rank, and it would be difficult for him to recover, which sounded like some kind of nonsense. A month later, all the boys were in formation, alive and well. In order to determine what kind of strength the showman had, Anjung asked him to hit a rough log. His arm had fully recovered, and thanks to his training, he could break such a rough log. The blow was quite powerful and heartfelt. The timbers bounced, but Shaw didn't have time to escape. Before rising to the first rank, a disciple needed to train at an above-average level. Liu Er's potions were making a difference, and Shosho had become much stronger. Now it was Liu Er's turn. Just yesterday she had said that she felt like she was about to rise to the second rank. Her strength had indeed gotten better, and that in just a month. She didn't use physical strength, but her natural strength, which she had developed over the course of this month. Her strength was really unusual. Even Anjen had never seen one in action, but Shosho was really frightened by it. Xiao Qidao hadn't even grown to half a log, but she was still very eager to test her strength, which was as extraordinary as Liu Er's. She smashed through 4 logs in a row with the swing of her fist. The girl didn't even go near them, but she smashed through them all. Xiao Qidao had only reached the second rank. It was a wonder when she had time to learn the wind fist technique, but it was against common sense. A disciple could only perform the wind fist perfectly after much practice. But Qidao was only 4.5 years old, and she was already able to turn her body's energy outward, which was mind-boggling. The competition was still 3 months away. Although the Huangshi library was stronger, they wouldn't be able to defeat the guys. However, Anjen had strictly forbidden Xiao Qidao from participating in the duels. To prepare for the battle for sure, Anjen continued to train diligently in the other space. His wounds had only just healed, but he had been practicing day and night, which showed that he was impatient. But on the other hand, he had to hurry up because the competition would be very soon. Anjung didn't want to fall face down in the mud. All of his guys achieved better results from training. He alone stood still. Besides, this curse made him not to waste his time. After all, the pearl bracelet was of no use right now. But every person improved in different ways. Some did it in their sleep, some got drunk, and to some, success comes with pain. Anjung was too worried. Old man Huo was devoid of any interest in the hermit life. He was only attracted to body training. But unfortunately, his talent was very limited. This was the beginning of him becoming one of the outstanding masters. He didn't want to lose, so he read books like a madman, memorizing every possible way to create chi energy. Until he happened to get a piece of pure meteoric iron the size of his palm. It was the best material to form the inner elixir. Then he took his own life energy from the Qi Sea and combined it with the meteorite, resulting in the best internal elixir directly linked to his own blood. Old man Huo had extracted his own life energy by creating an internal elixir, but he had no way to practice. Then he was worthless. Who would want to fight him in a duel? He longed for a chance to wow the world with his successes, and that took a lot of time and effort. On the day the top rank was established, Huo performed a technique that filled the red ritual vessel. On that day, the entire audience was astonished. That was when he told everyone that he would later become a top-rank incarnation. While he still couldn't match the talent of others, he had perseverance and an unwavering heart on his side. Anjing was already capable of handling 3 beads, but he still didn't understand the most important thing. They were purple vessels that self-regulated based on the power of the holder. An inactive seal could only provide Anjing with the necessary time. His current strength was not enough to utilize the seal. It was still in a stagnant state. As if the word stagnation had been imprinted into Anjing's head, a thought struck him. Now he knew how he would confront the Huangshi library. Xiao Qidao had extraordinary abilities. Forbidding her from participating in the duels was the right decision on Anjing's part, as she could draw unnecessary attention to herself. The only remaining question was, what about the competition? There was basically no need to worry. Anjing had already told the others that he had thought of something. A new young man was entering the Huangshi library. It was obvious that he was excited to enter here. and the teachers were only waiting for such people. Old man Huo saw that this young man was not so simple. If his eyes weren't deceiving him, his right hand was most likely artificial. Suddenly, Anjung remembered the person he had broken his arm. Chen Pu's son, Chen Qi. Could it really be him? But he didn't look like him, as if he had changed his face. The first thing Chen Qi wanted to do was to go to the 9 stars apparatus. Only the thing was that no one was allowed to go to it without permission from above. But if so, then of course the gentleman will be made an exception.
5 stars lit up in front of him!
But for some reason, when he did so, a memory flashed through his mind. His father had told him that they could only restore the family's honor when their father returned the family estate. And most importantly, Chen Qi should serve Xiaobayu until that happened. With such memories, it was difficult for him. But nevertheless, now he asked to be honored with a meeting with the Lord. The man immediately rushed over to the master, shouting that the new apprentice had as many as 5 stars. The deputy jumped up so much at this news that he pushed the poor woman standing behind him. In order to make a markup for the Huanxi library, the deputy made it clear that everyone was not accepted here, and asked the young man to introduce himself.
Chen Qi emphasized on learning everything by himself, also introduced himself as Chen Zhou, and asked to take the chest for his training.
With such a bribe, the deputy immediately soaked up sympathy for Chen Zhou. If he needed help, he could directly contact the deputy. Chen Qi was proud of his new name, Chen Zhou. It suited him very well. This name meant to stand for death, to burn my bridges, to cross the Rubicon. The esteemed head of the school was not in place at the moment, so Chen Zhou had to stay in the library for now. When the head returned, he would immediately organize everything. Along the way, he noticed a dilapidated building, seemingly also a martial arts school. He wondered if there were still students there. The deputy said that the school was a rabble, ignorant and arrogant. The head of the school was Anjung, who was also poor and lived without parents. The deputy was also sure that they would defeat them in the competition. Chen Zhou was looking for a meeting with someone who wasn't formally in charge of everything here. The man was quite aggressive, but when Chen asked him not to fight with Anjen in the competition, a fight broke out between them. Because they were two proud people, they decided everything through force. Chen Zhou won this time. He proved to be the strongest, and now everyone in the Huangxi library would obey him. Chen Zhou had prepared well for the coming encounter. What was left was to wait for it. In the middle of the dark night with only the moon shining, Anjung cozied up on the roof of the house. Amidst the starry sky, the sound of a bell and someone's voice could be heard. Anjung's head didn't seem to be too confident in his strength. Chen Xiaobei guessed that Anjen was seeking death, but he didn't expect it to be so subtle. Xiaobei couldn't understand why Anjen insisted on having that argument with the other school. Anjen didn't understand why he had suddenly appeared here. As soon as Xiaobei sat down next to him, Anjung had to turn away to avoid feeling his interlocutor's stench. But he didn't feel anything. Xiaobai's appearance was strange because he was going to train in that mysterious school. So why did he come now? Xiaobai was worried. He was worried that someone else wouldn't kill Anjen ahead of Xiaobai. Anjen had once helped him take revenge, and now Xiaobai would help him defeat the Huangxi library. Anjung only had to speak up and Xiaobai would kill everyone. Xiaobai was so eager for Anjen to agree to his proposal. Was he so tormented by his debt? Only the guy had once again miscalculated. Anjung was confident in his abilities, and knew that neither Xiaobai nor anyone from the Huangxi library would be able to kill him. Therefore, Anjung asked the guest to get out of here. He wasn't very happy about it, but on the other hand, he wasn't invited to come here. Anjen was quite troublesome to Xiaobai. The latter wanted to help him, but Anjen always refused. What a proud man. To be on the safe side, Xiaobai gave him a bell. If Anjen was dying, all he had to do was ring it and Xiaobai would come and save his bad head. If Anjung were to relax, Xiaobai would immediately skin him. No matter what he chooses, he'll still be a fool. Anjen understood all of this perfectly and threw a bell straight at Xiaobai's back. The guy directly spoke of his speculation, of Xiaobai's desire to spend him. Even though it was true, he was angry for some reason. Did he want to be a friend so badly? In any case, this is not their last meeting. Old man Huo was awake every night and heard Anjen as if he was talking to himself. Did he not notice Xiaobai? In any case, Anjen decided to tell about the guest and the bronze bell with obscure inscriptions that Xiaobai had given him. Surprisingly, Huo didn't even notice anyone other than Anjung on the rooftop. But he wanted to examine this bell. He learned that this item was made by the chief craftmaster. It was a magical item. There were still some people who would do anything. They would do even the most evil things for the sake of power. This bell was a demonic item, and this bell was one of them. With a sympathetic glance at Anjung, Huo wondered if something extremely important was happening to him. Could it be an extremely abrupt change of fortune? Of course, he wasn't going to say anything, and referred to being an orphan who had lived his whole life in this town. The purple magic item, the huge medicinal herb garden, it was all originally against the will of the sky. But right now, Anjung was once again facing a demonic item. Only whether it was good or bad was unknown to Old Man Huo. The demonic bell, the cursed parasite bracelet, it was all adding up very strangely. In a word, Huo could tell that the young man had an unusual fate. But he shouldn't forget that once taken to the extreme, things can only turn to their opposite. Afterward, one should be especially careful. Since Xiaobai was so confident that he was willing to kill everyone from the Huangxi library, then why did he let Chen Pu take away the family estate? And what is this mysterious school? On the street, every person was excited to see the duel between the two schools. Almost everyone was sure that this time the Tianzi school would be finished. Today was an important day, especially for Anjung after all. He was the reason for this dispute. The guys supported him as much as they could. They let him know that no matter what happens today, he will still be their head. The deputy was glad to console his ego with the fact that his opponents had been partying day and night, not practicing at all. Were they so sure of their victory? And on the street, they were betting that the Tianzi sect would win. The fact that at least some people believed that the sect could defeat the school strained the deputy. But the current head of the library was confident of Huangxi's victory. There were only some little kids in the sect. Why would they be so hard on themselves? But the chapter didn't know everything. Gao Sandu was a devil. He had inflated the stakes so that now the whole city was talking about the competition. If the library loses, its reputation will be ruined. But wasn't it the deputy himself who said that Tianqi sect's abilities were worthless because these guys didn't even have anyone to teach them? It was impossible to surpass the school in a few months. As soon as the temporary head left, the deputy did not hide his anger, because he was just a moron. The head spent all day eating, drinking, and going out with girls. He was useless. People had different opinions about the Tianqi sect, and more specifically about their disciples. Some people thought they were pretty good. Others despised the fat man. Some man broke through the crowd and shouted that he had bet all his money on the Tianzi sect. If the boys lost, he would skin them. But someone knocked the ignorant man over with one swipe of his hand, and he fell down, bleeding from his nose.
This was the most important player, Gao Sandu. He really disliked the fact that someone would start a scandal. And if someone started a scandal again, his wards would kill the scandalizer.
And Zheng was meeting him for the first time. Gao Sandu was a merchant. Today, the young master had a hard job waiting for him, so Gao Sandu wished him good luck. Also, if he had any difficulties, he could contact him. There wasn't really any difficulty, but the guys hadn't even had breakfast yet. At this moment, Gao Sandu was as if she was a genie that had popped out of the lamp and was ready to fulfill any wish. He had no trouble giving these guys a meal, so in about 15 minutes their wish was granted. The representatives of the Huangxi library appeared before the boys. If they were to lose in the competition today, the deputy wanted one thing: for them to kneel before them and then leave the city. But when asked if the library would lose, the deputy laughed like a horse. He was sure the library would win. As a result, the deputy was willing to open the doors of the Huangxi library to them for 3 days. This condition was completely inappropriate because Anjung didn't need this library even close. In the event of losing the library, the guys wanted themselves 20 low-quality soul jade stones, 1 medium quality, and another 30 jin of steel qilin. Only these conditions were not suitable for the deputy. The soul jade alone would be worth 1,000,000 yuan, and qilin steel was priceless. Gao Sandu watched everything unhappily and decided, betting the young lord 30 lower-grade soul jade stones and 1 manuscript on crafting medium-rank magic items. This manuscript was a priceless treasure. It corresponded to 20 jongs of steel qilin, so the sect was at an advantage. Gao Sandu was an unusual player. It was unknown why he was helping the Tianqi sect. The deputy did not expect that Gao Sandu, the boss of the gambling den, would give such support to this rabble. In any case, he had no way to influence it. The city's chief rich man was indeed boasting about his treasures. What if the temporary head added 2 more medium-quality soul jade stones and 20 jin of qilin steel? Gao Sandu respected the indestructible warlord for being an outspoken man of frank words. On this they agreed. The fight was supposed to be a 3-fight. 3 fights, 2 wins. But then again, such rules didn't suit Anjing. He decided that if they lost in 1 fight, then they would lose altogether. If the boys could not win a complete victory over their opponents, they would leave the city themselves. That was their decision. In this town, man to man is a wolf. It doesn't matter if you're a guy or a girl. If you only have one elderly psycho in your family, you're one too. And lunatics were not worthy of food. They were despised and considered complete outcasts. Liu Si was one of them. But when Old Man Chu appeared, he decided to name her Liu Er, which means street child. He gave her this name with the hope that it would take away all her hardships and she would never have to suffer again. Just like that, Old Man Chu became not only a teacher, but also a father, mother, and brother to the little girl. In the midst of her gray life, he was like a ray of sunshine. But now, another reality has set in, where Liu Er and her friends in misfortune can win and become famous, or go into exile from the city. And Zheng, before the duel began, had an important demand. No matter if they were defeated, in any case, another life must be repaid for the life of each person killed. The opponents mockingly laughed at them, but promised that they would not kill to death. The first to enter the duel was Li Hu, who would the second-rank outsider decide to go up against him. Liu accepted the challenge. The guys had decided everything beforehand and were going in their sequence. Liu had only risen to rank 1, and yet she wasn't going to show her weakness. The enemy was unhappy that they had sent the girl to the battlefield. The man protested and wasn't going to fight her. But now we had to see what this guy had to say after the fight was over. The beginning of the fight was very good. The girl could easily dodge his blows. Against this guy she was very flexible, and he in turn was sluggish, although he probably had more strength. This unfortunate person didn't even have time to keep an eye on his opponent, so he missed the moment when Liu Er threw him to the floor, thus had a better chance of winning. Due to the fact that she didn't use any techniques directly but still managed to incapacitate him, the girl was preserving her strength and would be able to focus it on a fatal blow in the future. The opponent only seemed formidable from the outside. In reality, against Liu Er, he would be difficult to resist since no one knew her strength. Thanks to her honed skills, she could now use one of the crescent moon kick techniques. In the end, the guy lost and found himself in the grip of his chains. At that moment he couldn't believe that he couldn't handle some girl. He wasn't strangled to death, but he fainted, and Liu Er was happy to appear victorious in this fight. Liu Er was just shining and basking in the joy of this moment. Her friends were always happy to support her no matter what happened. The deputy decided to send their win purely on luck, and warned the opponents not to rejoice before the time, because there are still 2 fights ahead. This time wanted to go on the show, but Anzheng decided that he would go out. The opponents knew that Anzheng was their leader. The guy was already afraid, for he assumed that dealing with him would be the hardest thing to do. Feng Xiaoxi had risen to the 2nd rank, but it could be seen that he was chickening out of fear. And this is people's reaction when Anzheng introduced himself and said he was unranked. Gao Sandu actually wondered if he had placed the right bet. It was a fair and just competition, and Anzheng was a mentor and a hardened practitioner. So why did he lie about the rank? He wasn't lying, but telling the pure truth, for he really didn't have a rank. People were dumbfounded by this turn of events. A head who had no rank wanted to compete with those who had reached the 2nd rank. It's incomprehensible. Thank goodness someone had put a huanxi on the library after all. People were so angry and wanted to leave already. There was nothing to do here. Gao Sandu, after this news, he realized what he had wasted the jade of life. The viceroy of the library literally made a comedy out of it, as if he understood why Anzheng insisted on not killing. Was it because he was afraid of dying? This fight was still left to Feng Haoxi after all. The latter had promised that he would punch weakly and the opponent wouldn't die. And Zhen not only practiced in this place himself, but also brought his friends here, of course. In this place, not only did time pass much slower than outside, but the growth of spiritual power was also much slower. Even though this room is useless in terms of spiritual powers, the boys could use it for their training.
If the Huangxi Library will train for a few months, the guys are still like a few years. Their skills and spiritual strength will reach a certain degree.
The Theantian sect would be able to fight within their abilities and even oppose others. This was their key factor of victory. The opponent's hand didn't even have time to reach Anzheng before he immediately grabbed it. And then came the punch to the stomach, which knocked the enemy out of himself. After a few such blows, Feng Xiaoxi lay on the floor shaking with fear. But that wasn't the end, and Zhen decided to continue fighting since the opponent was conscious. So why not finish it off before the end? Feng Xiaoxi was too slow and inexperienced, so he was defeated. People appreciated Anzheng's skill. His opponent didn't even have a chance to start fighting. He was brutally finished off. Anzheng had no rank, but his combat skills had almost reached the highest level. It was no wonder he was so fearless. For the third duel, Anzheng decided to perform by himself again and summoned the remaining Huanxi from the library. The challenge was of course accepted. Chen Zhou had been waiting for this moment to refuse for a very long time. He made it clear to his enemy that he was the one Anzheng had broken his arm and he wasn't going to feel sorry for him. Chen Zhou was faster and stronger this time, so he immediately knocked Anzhen out. But the one did not fall down. Anzheng had assumed this guy was Chen Qi, so he was not discouraged right now. Whether he knew or not, doesn't matter anymore. Chen Zhou tried to keep his strength under control so that his opponent wouldn't die too quickly. Chen Zhou has one arm throwing Anzheng a decent distance away, but Anzheng is trying to control the action by doing a somersault. Recently, Anzhen had said that Feng Xiaoxi was slow, but right now the slow one in Chen Zhou's eyes was Anzhen. When Anzhen broke his arm, this guy wasn't that strong. It had only been a few months. How had Chen Zhou managed to make such progress? There was speculation, and most likely he had accomplished this with the elixir of immortality. Then it was clear why his power had increased so quickly. Chen Zhou's progress was much faster than Anzheng's. If the latter used his strength, Anzheng would be in danger. Was it also pointless to get up now? Chen Zhou was paying for his past shame 100-fold to Anzhen. This guy's blows did not stop. He was beating Anzheng as much as he could, enjoying his revenge. How long can Anzheng hold out? He's reached a good level in his training, but what will this argument come out to be? With his left hand, Anzheng effortlessly righted his right arm. He knew that the fight was not over yet, and he had every chance to win. Chen Zhou decided to take cold weapons into action. His soul was overflowing with revenge. He blamed Anzheng for even killing Chen Zhou's father. Anzheng was a bit weak to Chen Zhou. In this battle, he could be helped by his steadfastness, luck, and willpower. Gao Sandu was already dissatisfied before, but now he would really hate to see Anzheng's young face be all bloody and ask to stop the battle after all. Anzheng had already lost. But Chen Zhou didn't even think of sparing his opponent, who he considered the culprit of all his troubles. Anzheng didn't admit defeat yet, so he wasn't a loser. Only when Anzheng kneels down and begs for mercy will Chen Zhou get all the juices out of him. In order to win, Anzheng needed to happen the speed of Chen Zhou. In order to do so, he should only rely on his senses. Not his eyes, but it was his senses that would reveal the true state of affairs to him. And now the enemy was attacking from the back again. Anzheng decided to trust his body and focus on his senses. Anzheng has chosen the right tactic as he's now managing to avoid the strikes from Chen Zhou. The sensation gave him incredible speed to get behind his enemy's back, thus taking him by surprise. Chen Zhou was confident in his strength and didn't expect Anzhen to be able to avoid his punches. So he failed to react in time and fell to the floor. Everyone, especially the main player, watched this fight with bated breath. Anzheng still managed to strike. Who knows whose favor this fight would be in? Chen Zhou didn't give up and stood up again, only now with a different technique. It was a mid-level transformation art technique. The transformation was clearly visible. Half of his face was in snakeskin, and his eyes were glowing even worse than a snake's. Every time this fight became more dangerous, Anzheng was trying to escape from this snake because he realized that he had no opposition to it. But the snake of the enemy was stronger and faster. This battle was like a pendulum swinging faster and faster, and no one had the right to interrupt it. Around him, the fight recreated a disgusting aura that took over the spectators as well. But there was no place for them to go either. But now it was Anzhen's turn to show Anzhen his true strength, now that the opportunity had presented itself. His strength exceeded Chen Zhou's by several times. Now he didn't stand a chance. The roles had changed drastically. People in fear of what was happening were trying to scatter to somewhere safer. Anzheng, as Old Man Huo had anticipated, had reached a new level. Although it would be hard to foresee that it was at a time like this that he would improve his skills. In one fell swoop, Anzheng had reached the 3rd rank. Everyone had different ways of manifesting the attainment of a new rank, but no one expected Anzhen to taste his Sea of Qi right during battle. The so-called Sea defined the difference between humans and the gifted. In ordinary people, the Sea Qi is dormant. In order to revitalize it, one must wash the bones with the help of some forces from outside. For example, let's take Xiao Qidao. If her Sea Qi is visualized as a door, it will most likely be as tall as a tree. For ordinary people, this door will be of ordinary size. But of course, there are huge doors with a whole mountain. In the same way, one could consider the transition to a new rank. The more effort spent on building this door, the higher the rank. As man improved, his power and so increased even more. But if the doorway was too small, the abilities would reach some undefined level and stagnation would set in. The person could no longer move. Here came Anzheng managing to reach the 3rd rank. He really couldn't be underestimated. It started out as an ordinary competition between schools, but in the end, it turned into a relationship and destroyed everything around it. If Xiaobai had known that it would come out this way, he wouldn't have given Anzheng his bell. The scenario from the past resumed again, although Chen Zhou became a little stronger, but Anzhen surpassed him several times again. It might have seemed as if his opponent no longer wanted to continue the battle, but after these rebukes, he rose again and pounced on the man he hated. It would have been better for him to give up, and Zheng wasn't going to pity him and broke his arm again, the same arm he had already broken once before. Chen Zhou thought Anzheng was a liar, as it was obvious that he had a rank, and he wouldn't admit it. A deputy intervened in this battle, accusing Anzheng of breaking the rules. It seemed as if Anzheng was talking about keeping moderation and not injuring the opponent badly. Only Anzhen was only willing to end this battle when the opponent would admit defeat. Like a dog on a chain, Chen Zhou continued to swear that he had not lost and would kill Anzhen. But his arm was already useless. He couldn't use it anymore. If they didn't find a doctor right away, Chen Zhou might lose it for the rest of his life. Taking a better look at her opponent's hand, Liu could easily notice an oddity in his hand. This mindfulness did nothing to help him. He resented the fact that things might come to light. His left hand didn't turn into a beast of prey, and his right hand only has a palm that changes. Also, in time, and so his left hand was the leading hand. Justifying that he was lefty didn't help him at all. The place where his right arm joined his shoulder was stitched together, which meant he was changing his arm. In the past, one remembers such an incident where a number of children went missing from the city. They were only found dead, none of them survived, and they were all missing one arm. It seems that this man lost one of his hands, and so, to replace it, he kidnapped and killed all the children. Liu Er's arguments were quite rational and made sense. Gao Sandu decided to beat the truth out of him. Did he really kidnap and kill children? Would he be willing to tell the truth? The deputy librarian came to his defense, hoping and firmly defending that it was all slander. To make it not slanderous, it had to be proved first. Proof was found among the people. A mother recognized her son's hand. She recognized it because her son had a birthmark on his arm in the shape of a flower. She remembered it so clearly. All the evidence was right there in public. Even the bribed deputy could no longer counter anything with such evidence. All the people unanimously demanded the execution of this monster. He couldn't even spare a child. And where did the Huangxi library look? Why did they accept him as one of their students? Chen Zhou felt as if he had lost his mind and was laughing hysterically. He saw that all these people were a mob of wolves who were dressed up in sheepskins. He believed that all these people were nothing. They had no right to accuse him, for who among them did not have blood on their hands? Why did they think they were saints? Chen Zhou asked for help from Guishou's grandfather Zhu. After this, they would be even. There were many legends about this old man, and he was unrivaled in fights. It became clear that someone was indeed standing behind Chen Zhou's back and giving him instructions. The old man agreed and was happy to help the petitioner. But Gao Sandu was not happy about such events. This brat was rampaging in his territory. How dare he even dare to do such a thing? He launched several of his blades directly into the portal that appeared, which pierced through it. But his strength wasn't enough, because he was dealing with the power of a prisoner imprisoned on the border of worlds. In order to not even give his friends a chance to hurt themselves, Anzhen immediately pushed them away and rushed into battle. Xiaobai, who was still here watching what was happening, thought that this madman had lost his mind. He couldn't just leave his best opponent for dead. Therefore, he called for the bell that he had given to Anzheng one night. The bell was completely covered in Xiaobai's dark energy and was now piercing through that portal. The energy, and for that matter himself and the bell, were quite strong. As they say, the dark could only be resisted by the dark. The old man himself flew out of this portal, and his arm was now pierced because of the bell. Grandpa couldn't understand why Anzheng had the bell in the first place. Chen Zhou had also deceived the old man by pretending to be young Master Chen. But the old man could speak no more. The bell through his mouth pierced his head through, and beyond that returned to his master. What was happening seemed unbelievable and frightening. Gaishou Ju's old man was killed. Now the guy was all alone. He had no more tricks up his sleeve to get out of this situation. It would be useless for him to stay here because he would be killed. The most logical solution was to fly away, which he did. And Zheng wasn't going to just let this rotten man go and decided to run after him. But that nasty old man blocked his way and started throwing accusations that he was a worthless orphan, that he had not told him everything. How could an orphan have such a valuable thing as a bell? Chen Zhou had already fled quite a distance, and it had already gotten dark. The darkness should have hidden his presence altogether, but not from Xiaobai, who knew him like the back of his hand. The young master was already waiting for him on the roof. Originally, it seemed to Xiaobai that Chen Zhou was just a silly puppy. The young master didn't expect him to understand how to use the Chen family's strength. His mood was getting hysterical. He wanted to destroy everything and everyone around him, but now he had to kill Xiaobai, who hated him. The lord in turn didn't even try to make any unnecessary movements, because against such a fool, a single glance of his red demonic eyes was enough for him. This evil man's heart stopped for eternity. This man was destroyed by his own hatred, which devoured his soul from within. Although Chen Qi was worthless, but he could take pride in making Xiaobai look at him in a new way. Xiaobai himself didn't know why the Chen family existed, and Chen Qi will never know. The deputy hovered with his question about the bell as if it was his bell, and Anzhen had stolen it. The young man had nothing to say except that he'd just found it somewhere. I thought it was a beautiful bell. I should tie it around the kitten's neck. But the wicked old man didn't believe him and cursed him as well. People's envy also awoke, for the thing was good. One bronze bell managed to defeat a warrior who was imprisoned on the border of worlds. Well, if a single person wanted to take this bell away from Anzheng, then he had nothing against it. But then he would swear that there would be rivers of blood. There were still quite a few strong people in the Huanxi library as well. It could be assumed that it was likely that someone would want to take away this bell. But old man Guishou is not their opponent at all. Why should they be afraid of him? And Zheng and his team were supposed to get the prizes, so the leader decided to give the Qilin steel to Liu Er, so that old man Huo would build her a furnace, and because of that, she would make immortality pills. And Jin knew that Liu Er liked the medicinal arts much more than training. The girl's tears of happiness flowed because Zhen had almost given his life for this prize. It could be considered a gift for Liu Er. Chen Qi had of course escaped, but Anzheng was still uneasy in his heart. Therefore he decided to go and check something. At his favorite place, where the young man usually immersed himself in reflection, he met a corpse. Someone he had wanted to kill months ago. At the same place, his favorite opponent, Xiaobai, was waiting for him. And Zhen kept wondering who he was, but he never found the answer. Xiaobai himself responded to this as follows. His full name was Chen Xiaobai, nothing more. And Sheng should remember this name. Maybe the glory of this name and more will rumble around the world. But since the interlocutor did not want to answer, it would be better to keep silent at all, rather than continue to praise himself. The sign with Xiaobai's name on it was removed from the Chen house. He and Anzhen would not see each other again until he had sorted out his affairs in this city. The two had developed a special friendship. They liked each other in their own way. The news that Xiaobai might never come back again had tugged at Anzhen's heartstrings. Maybe he'll come back, but only after many years. Then why doesn't Anzheng drink from Xiaobai's bootleg in his honor? Let him drink and get lost, thought Xiaobai as usual out loud. And Zheng wanted to know at least something from this person, besides Xiaobai's identity itself. And Zheng was also curious as to why he had given him such a dangerous thing. The answer was simple. Of course, to get Anzhen to help him too. Not out of love, of course. Xiaobai had planned everything in advance. From the very beginning, he wanted to use Chen Pu to do all the dirty work for him. Of course, Anzhen would not help the young master in his dirty deeds. Xiaobai appreciated Anzhen's intelligence and wit. Surely everyone he got along well with was also getting wiser day by day. Xiaobai, for example, was a marvelous talent, the only one for all ages. For Anzheng to find out who Xiaobai is, he should grow up a little more, and Zheng's world lies ahead of him. And just like that, they said goodbye. Who knows, maybe this won't be the last time they'll see each other. Anzheng noticed one small detail. The pattern on the bell matched the pattern on Xiaobai's bootleg. He decided to share this with old man Huo, but the old man had never encountered it. He had only heard that some ancient families had their own coats of arms, and Anzheng's buddy probably belonged to such a family. However, there was something else. Anzhen had already reached the 3rd rank. But why didn't the blood pearls have any effect on him? Old man Huo took a closer look and really recognized the medicinal field. On one hand, the blood pearls were drawing blood from his body. But on the other hand, the medicinal field continued to strengthen his health. This was how the golden mean worked out, which was why Anzheng was still unharmed, which was fine. And you could thank that ancient mummy for all of that. But it looks like it wasn't worth thanking yet. And Zheng seemed to be in a good mood since he had called the market show with him. It was true. He could see that the boys were well trained. Their results showed it. But they needed a couple of artifacts to help them train. Therefore, they were now heading to Jushan Manor. Xiaoshan, who and was still recently in her master's arms, suddenly disappeared somewhere. Kitty spotted herself a beautiful plate. Surely she must have sensed something precious in it.
And Zheng began to suspect it. The fact that this plate was not simple could not be ruled out.
For a few cerebrenics, he decided to buy it. Even if it's worthless, a dishcloth is never superfluous. Within a few days, Mr. Du would be evaluating the valuables at Jushang Manor. Accordingly, it was impossible to come here without a letter of invitation, but an old acquaintance stood up for her friend, and Zheng was always allowed to pass at any time. Zhuang Fei kindly invited her long-awaited guests inside. They were also met there by another acquaintance. Gao Sandu didn't he expect to see the head of Anzheng himself on such a day. The deputy librarian was also here, of course, and he was surprised that this rabble had shown up here. After all, only the major figures of this city were invited today, and Zheng of course heard this and decided to tease this old man. On top of that, he also had Mr. Du's help. As a result, the deputy himself was labeled as a rabble-rouser. Huan Fei asked me to do her a favor, to direct all her thoughts to grading today, but there was a little game planned to start with. It's all about making sure the guests' skills are up to par. In front of the guests were 6 completely identical emerald discharge vessels for making the elixir of immortality. However, their inner contents were different. The rules were, you could not lift the lid, you could not use spiritual power, and you could only tap on the lid. Judging by the echoes, the guest could find out what was underneath. After that, one had to write the answer on pieces of paper, and at the end the results would be announced. Of course, a small reward awaits the winner. Hairpins of special craftsmanship, emerald discharge, created from mountain rose. It is also a means to protect the skin from various parasites. Beauty will not fade, and 200 more years. You can give them to your favorite girls, which will certainly give them pleasure. Gao Sandu decided to start, thus paving the way for everyone. The observers were amazed at the technique that Gao Sandu used. He was worthy to be called the head of all the gambling houses, for he had seen many things and knew many things. However, he didn't have a very satisfied look on his face. Didn't he have a good guess? The deputy library Huang Shi decided to come out next. His abilities? People were no less impressed after all. Not everyone could really do this. Even Zhuang Fei decided to praise him. He was worthy of bearing his surname, Zhen, after all. His skill in assessing values was not lacking. The deputy couldn't wait to see how Anzheng would get away with it this time. In one fell swoop, he swept his hand across all the saucers. He listened more closely to the sounds, as if he were reading information from a single tune. It must have been a minute, and he had already given his answer. It was very fast because he made the conclusion in just a blink of an eye. People couldn't even understand how he did it. He couldn't just wave his hand and give some kind of answer. Now it was time to sound out all the recorded answers. Among the answers could be found pure life iron, Eastern Mountain obsidian, Zhoushan iron, motley meteorite iron. All these 4 items were named correctly, but the 5th, namely the yellow pear tree from the South Sea, was correctly named only by a substitute. The deputy grew up in that area, so he was very familiar with this tree. The others present hailed from the north. They were not familiar with such a tree, which was forgivable. As usual, Anzheng decided to refute the deputy's arguments. He thought they were wrong, because it was the bark of a 500-year-old cork tree from Dongting. The yellow pear is of the emerald variety, but the cork tree is of the higher white variety. The money from its sale can buy a lot of things. The deputy tried to prove otherwise because yellow pear has a star-shaped finish, corkwood does not. And Zhen could only say that this was the outlook of the deputy head of the illusion school. That was all. There is a pattern of black dots on the surface of the vessel. It is clearly not the star-shaped finish of the yellow pear. If it were yellow pear, the weight would be 7 jian and 2 liang. With cork wood, the weight is a little different. Its weight is at least 9 jin and 9 liang. In order to resolve this dispute, Zhuang asked to check this. The truth was on Anzheng's side, which made the deputy very angry. Mr. Anzheng's skills are unrivaled. But what's the result of the evaluation? The answer for the 6th item was incense ashes. But everyone was wrong, for it was a vessel made of the ashes of a saint. Only Anzheng's answer was correct. The young man was delighted to give such a precious rose to this lady who had treated him so well. The deputy was still resentful, with only Rose at stake, but he was trying so hard to prove his point, while constantly despising Anzheng, saying that he was an orphan and couldn't have so much knowledge. In his past life, he had been a Da Shiming warehouse keeper for 10 years. For him, distinguishing between these things is easy, but for the public he made up another story. One day he was stunned and found that he was in a golden hall where there were books everywhere. When he read them, he learned everything. In order for people not to even dare to doubt the veracity of these words, Shoshu would say that he had witnessed it himself. When Anjung woke up, he immediately turned into an all-knowing sage. The lie was so true that even Zhuang Fei realized that his words were trustworthy. He had great intuition. He recognized most of the material. You just need him to look at it and say. The only distrustful person here was only the deputy. He didn't believe a single word Zheng said and knew that this guy would sow confusion everywhere. Gao Sandu stood up for the head. The deputy had embarrassed himself in front of others, and now he was trying to slander An Zheng. This could not be condoned, as it was hard to find a good word about the deputy's temperament. The deputy had already decided to turn a blind eye to who was right or wrong, but he didn't understand why An Zheng would even think that the deputy had reasoned and wrong. A high-ranking monk from the southern suburbs placed the incense ashes from the smoker as well as the linquin water into a huge vessel, then burned it on a true fire. So this vessel of incense ash was created. In it, it was possible to make the elixir of immortality of white discharge, but it can only be used 36 times, after which it will reduce its discharge to emerald. The deputy's words were true, but still, this vessel was from the ashes of the holy red discharge. In one temple there lived a monk who had deeply learned the wisdom of the Buddha. When his death came, he gave his last testament. The monk wanted to use his ashes to strengthen the 20 vessels and save them from destruction, so that the whole world might be saved. After the monk was cremated, his ashes were enough for exactly 20 vessel spheres. Right now, one could look at the vessel and notice that one of those spheres was on the vessel. Gao Sandu decided to pay his respects to the high-ranking monk and bowed respectfully to him.
Vessels with these spheres are extremely rare, with many people specifically hunting for them.
Hedan Zheng was absolutely right. So Zhuang ordered this vessel to be removed and placed in the main hall. That monk merely wished to save people but ended up becoming an idol that people bow down to. And Zheng's abilities were much higher than an ordinary person. Without fail, Zhuang Fei felt that she should pick him as the winner. And Zheng was an immodest boy and had already asked for a reward. Previously, all the vessels were emerald grade, but now, one had become white grade, and there's another one of red grade. What its value in silver is, Zhuang Fei should know better. If An Zheng starts coming to this house more often, Zhuang Fei will agree to any conditions. But would they still give him the vessel of ashes? If Jusheng Manor needed An Zheng's help later on, he would not refuse anything. It was a serious matter, so Huan asked for a few days to consider it. Today's visit was over. Other valuables would be evaluated tomorrow. But why did An Zheng need this vessel? Liu Er was a soft and kind girl. Steel Kiln was too hard a material and was not suitable for her at all. It was much better to use this particular vessel. Already out of good old habit, the deputy had a grievance with An Zheng as usual. Just because the young man hadn't killed him with that bell didn't mean he couldn't do it now, for example. Could it be that after this hint, he would finally let go of the guys? An Zheng was always making him look like a fool. But it's not easy to get rid of the young man. Xiaoshan seemed to really love this plate since she couldn't move away from it. Suddenly, An Zheng realized something. It wasn't the plate that the kitty liked, but the cloth the plate was wrapped in. To find out more about it, you should find Old Man Huo. When they returned to the Tianzi sect, the gate was open. Once inside, one could see that all the things were scattered around, as if someone was looking for something or trying to intentionally make a mess here. Could it have been the thieves? The sudden realization that something might have happened to his loved ones caught An Zheng in unconcealed terror. They immediately went to Lu Er's room to see if everything was all right. But none of the three of them were there. Both the living room and the private rooms were all scattered. His whole body was gripped with anger. It seemed as if he was ready to crush the entire world. This girl had always been so sweet and caring to him. He always worried about her and tried to please her, but now she was gone. Was the man she defeated in the duel trying to get back at her? But maybe hope was still there. Maybe they had time to hide in the press? Without wasting a moment, An Zheng along with his friend immediately moved to another space. An Zheng looked for them everywhere, trying to pick up any trace of them. And oh thank God, the girl with Huo had found him on her own. All this time they seemed to have been over here and didn't even notice that something had happened in their house. As soon as the guy saw her, it could seem as if he wanted to hug her, to feel her to see if she was her or not, to finally protect her from the whole hostile world, but soon pulled himself together and said it was okay. Shaw was more emotional and was already crying. He was very happy that nothing happened to them. Only his emotions were prevented from showing by An Zheng. He wondered if the guys had been here the whole time and hadn't gone anywhere. As it turned out, Old Man Huo made a vessel for Liu Er to prepare immortality pills. They were doing well. Old man Huo had told her that when she reached the 5th rank, she would be able to use this vessel. Liu was very talented, and she had this space at her disposal. Because of this, she would reach rank 5 very quickly. The girl was overjoyed that she finally had her own vessel for making immortality pills. She was very grateful to Anjung for this, as it was his initiative. She was embarrassed and wanted to give him a gift. It was an immortality stone. It should definitely bring good luck to Anjung. But isn't that superstition, as Shaw believed? This guy always had trouble knowing when and what to say on time, and his body was paying the price. Liu always thought that her good fortune was their meeting with Anjen, and whatever good fortune she had in the future, Liu wanted to share it with him. She hoped that Anjing would not encounter any dangers along the way. Anjung in turn was very happy that Hu and Liu were fine. The young man promised that he would always keep this stone given to Liu as a gift. Shosho and Jung left to look after everyone, and went to settle old scores himself. The one who dared to raise his hand against the Tianzi school.
Sure to die at the hands of its head.
Thanks to Xiaobai's bell, finding the culprit of the attack wasn't that difficult. And Jing wasn't sure, but it really turned out to be Li Hu, the defeated Liu rival. And Jing didn't even have time to say anything before he begged for mercy. He had lost to Liu so he harbored hatred in his heart. Then he broke into her room, probably intending to kidnap her. But something was wrong. He didn't want to kidnap the girl, he wanted to steal something else. In the end, this guy still wanted to hurt her. But he didn't have time. After saying that, Anjung didn't even try to hold back, and hit the guy as hard as he could. If he even touched Liu with a finger, he would be disgraced and killed at the same moment. Here comes the deputy with his moralizing. He said that when you beat a dog, you should look at its owner, because according to the deputy, Anjung has too much ambition. The young man did not tolerate it any longer, and as luck would have it, he killed a student of the Huangxi Library, right in front of the deputy. If the disciples of the Huangxi Library and once again infiltrate the Tianqi sect, Anjung would be forced to kill every single one of them. Either that, or he will die himself. From that moment, the feud between the Tianzi sect and the Huangxi Library began. This feud will never end. This young man is like a demon. He kills and moves on. Killing destroys his soul, but he's as calm as Buddha. This was the way to establish himself in this world spread out before him. Apparently, Xiaobai no longer had anything to worry about, for Anjung's soft-heartedness was gone, and in its place came the icy coldness of killing. Old man Huo regarding that cloth didn't know anything, and hadn't even managed to discover anything. It was a fresh spring day, but suddenly Shoshu and Anjenu smelled like shit. Right after that night, the deputy decided to report the murder of a library student to the head. And all he did was cite the reputation of the Huangxi Library. The head judged from all of the above that Anjung had the determination to kill. If he was raised by the military, he would definitely become a great military leader. The interim head understood perfectly well that this was a personal dispute between the deputy and Anjung, but not the school in any way. The head wanted to really take Anjing under his wing, which the deputy thought was extremely outrageous. There were rumors that Li Hu was training Zhenzang Bi, and the latter was already getting close to Anjin. But the young man was not afraid of anything, and he was more interested in whether or not something good would happen in Jushan's fate. Yesterday's competition had allowed Zhuang Fei to learn a lot of things. Today was going to be a test of the guest's vision strength. Of course, there were also more prizes to be won today than yesterday. Zhuang Fei had already jokingly thought that Anjung would give her these prizes today as well. There will be no loss to the lady since all prizes will be placed in her hands. All attention shifted in an instant to the incoming door, where a huge hulking man stood, slumped over the man. It was Guman from the Gule clan. He had heard that there was going to be a big treasure competition here, so he came here specially for that. Whoever this person was, Zhuang Fei was not happy that he was barging in here uninvited. But what was he to do then? He had one thing to offer, which meant he needed to go in. Not to be unsubstantiated, Guman, with his mistress's permission, showed a huge stone that even in the wrapped cloth was shining its light through. Huan Feifei seems to recognize what it was. Raised his hand, she closed the gate with her power. According to the rules of Jushan Manor, you can only close the gate when astonishingly rare valuables appear. None of the people here had ever seen anything like it. They had no idea what it was. Anjung had one guess. It could be the scales of that great fish he had met once. Madam, she realized from the people's reactions that only Zhuang Fei knew the values and the rest were unsophisticated amateurs. The girl introduced herself as Gu Qianye, the head of the Gu Lei clan. Gu Qian, in exchange for the holy fish scales, wanted all the valuables that Jushan Manor had. This price was too much, and of course, Huan Feifei exiled it all to legend. But Anjung protested because he had seen this fish and knew that it was not a legend. A few centuries ago, the world was in absolute chaos. The sun of the goddess Shihei rose over the south. According to legend, the clan that came from this sun came to rule the world as it was favored by the holy fish. Whenever the holy fish showed itself, it was a sign of impending devastation. The Gula clan never questioned these predictions. If Huan Fei Fei recognized these scales, then she also knew its price. Huan still thought it was just a symbol of times long past, and the clan's demands were too high. But that was okay. There was another establishment in this city that Guqian would be able to sell scales to. It was called Debaoje. Before the clan head would leave with the scales to the competitors, Huan Fei Fei asked for 1 minute to think. In the end, 1 hour passed. The girl was experienced in such matters and tried to stretch the time to think as long as possible. She had a plan that had already come to fruition. And Zheng was not far away and noticed that the person who had come was stinking of blood. And he wasn't wrong. Huan Fei Fei had wiped out all of her competitors. In Debaojai, there was no one left alive. And in the city, her place was the only one where Guqian would be able to make such a deal. It didn't take much intelligence to guess that Zhuang Fei Fei hired someone to destroy Debaojai. Chief Elder Gulei was right about this woman being worse than the most bloodthirsty warriors. Anything could happen in this city. Huan didn't think it was her fault, since the Debaojai were just weak and couldn't defend themselves. After all, something had to change. Huan advised the young clan head to think about something too. The woman decided to continue her auction again, as if nothing had happened. At her command, people brought a huge coffin covered with a red blanket. No one would have thought they would have thought to bring a coffin. It stank disgustingly. But when people looked closer, the guesses were unbelievable. It was a bronze coffin, and it had drops of water on it, as if it had been pulled from the very bottom of some river. A few days ago, a strong current of water carried the coffin to the shore, and the people who found it decided to sell the coffin to the estate. It turned out to be an underwater coffin. For quite a long time, people have not encountered two kinds of coffins: underwater and suspended coffins. Most underwater coffins could have been contained by various devices. It was most likely washed ashore during a major flood. This bronze coffin was intact and tightly closed, so the flood did not cause much damage. Very often, underwater coffins concealed something terrible, and if opened, rivers of blood would be spilled. Therefore, Zheng suggested his companions not to linger here and leave the sooner the better. But Guqian's aide became at their exit. He couldn't let anyone out of the manor until the deal was finalized. But who here dared to forbid a third-ranked man from leaving if he wished? The clan head, thinking that they were some cowards, allowed her aide to release them.
The fish scales have decided to come out of Gu Manya's pocket.
And then she headed straight for Anjen. The bracelet like a magnet absorbed the scales like any other valuable item. At this moment, everyone was surprised at that and started to wonder who Anjung was. All they needed to know was that he had no interest in other people's subjects. Of course, the deputy librarian also had to put in his 5 cents. After all, from the outside it looked strange. A young man had taken possession of a jewel and said he didn't care about it. And Zheng just couldn't get rid of that bracelet. Who didn't believe him could see for themselves? Except that the power of those bronze bells was limitless. Who in their right mind would try it or go near it at all? But if you look at it, in essence, the fish didn't get rid of the scales by themselves either. And Zheng suggested the following. When he found a way to remove the bracelet and take out the scales, he had to decide how he could get the scales back. The clan head made a decision quickly and decided to go along with Anjung. But how so? Huan Fei Fei had to destroy Debaojai for this deal. Didn't she think that giving it up now was somehow too much? They never started the transaction, and it was left up to Guqian to decide what to do with the fish scales. Meanwhile, while everyone was distracted by the exhibit, the coffin was starting to have some anomalies. He was originally colored a strange bloody color, but now changed to purple and opened up altogether. The coffin was abandoned. What Anjung feared might be about to happen. Would there really be no chance for anyone to be saved?